Chapter 1999. Jiang Jioshi's pupil shrank. Just as he was about to push her away, he heard her slightly disorderly breathing. "Brother, don't move. I'll carry you to bed." Although he had been in a wheelchair, he had no problem taking care of himself. After all, he still had one leg that could barely act as his center of gravity. If he was given a crutch, he could take a shower by himself. But Wei Wei Bai didn't know. She thought that he couldn't stand up on his own, so she came to carry him. The sudden contact wasn't because she was enlightened. It was because she wanted to help him. Jiang Jiushi didn't move for a moment. He thought that it was impossible for her to carry him. After all, his weight was still very heavy. His bones were from training. Although his body looked thin, he was much heavier than people of similar size. But unexpectedly, after Wei Wei Bai's hands grabbed his armpits, she actually dragged him out of the wheelchair. She didn't even ask where the bedroom was and just wanted to drag him forward. His legs were long and dangling on the floor. As she walked forward with difficulty, his shoes were rubbed away. Jiang Jiushi was still a little confused when he heard Wei Wei Bai say intermittently, "Brother, you're so heavy, but I can do it." Bai Wei Wei was also putting on an act, but she didn't expect that this body actually had some strength. It was stronger than the average girl. She dragged him out of the wheelchair. Maybe it was because of dancing that she had this strength. Where's she dragging him to? Jiang Jiushi looked at himself speechlessly in such a sorry state, being dragged by a delicate girl. In the end, Wei Wei Bai dragged him to the sofa and stuffed him on it. Then, she reached out with some difficulty and casually tucked her scattered hair behind her ear. "Then wait for me. I'll give you a waterproof shower." Jiang Jiushi moved his lips as if hesitating. In the end, he said, "Okay, the bathroom is behind the door on your left." Wei Wei Bai immediately rolled up her sleeves, revealing her slender and beautiful arms. He couldn't believe that it was such a slender arm that had dragged him to the sofa. Wei Wei Bai actually managed to pull him up. Moreover, she did not run away, nor did she suspect his intentions. She really intended to take good care of him. Jiang Jioshi's thoughts were interrupted by Wei Wei Bai. Her hands were wet. She quickly ran over, grabbed his armpits, and dragged him into the bathroom. Jiang Jiushi was dumbfounded. After all, it was already very good that she had delayed it once. She actually dragged him down a second time. He even forgot to mention that he could walk with a cane. Also, the doors of the rooms in the house were specially designed so that wheelchairs could enter. But as soon as he saw Wei Wei Bai and the little cow, he rushed over and dragged him back and forth. He choked on his words. Wei Wei Bai struggled to drag him into the bathtub. During this process, not only did Wei Wei Bai have a hard time, but Jiang Jiushi also felt that he was very miserable. Not only did his legs hit the floor, but his head was also hit by the door. If he didn't know that Wei Wei Bai was doing this on purpose, he would have thought that she was going to murder him. Also, she directly threw him into the bathtub with his clothes on. It was full of water. This kind of bath was too rough. When Wei Wei Bai saw his clothes floating in the water, she suddenly remembered something and widened her eyes. Chapter 2000. Brother, I didn't do it on purpose. She was at a loss. She crossed her hands and hopped around like a pitiful little rabbit. I was going to put you on the edge of the bathtub, but I didn't have the strength and pushed you into the bathtub. Jiang Jiushi saw her like this. The anger in his heart disappeared. He said, "It's okay. I'll take it off myself." When Wei Wei Bai heard this, her face changed a little. She immediately covered her eyes and stepped back. "I'll get it for you." After saying that, she ran away and closed the bathroom door. Jiang Jiushi, he thought that she would stay and scrub his back. All he could think of was scrubbing his back to release the heat and then pulling her into the bathtub to make some sauce. Jiang Jiushi sighed and looked at himself lying in the bathtub. He had never been in such a sorry state since he succeeded. He thought silently as he took off his clothes. But was this the fun of teaching a little lover? Although he felt all kinds of sorry and confused, the process was a little messy. But he seemed to be in a good mood. Jiang Jiushi finished showering. He had always been very fast. When he held the bathtub with both hands and was propped up, he pressed a button next to him. An invisible automatic wall cabinet slowly opened, and a crutch appeared inside. Every room in this house had this. He could move with the crutch. Just as he was about to take the crutch, the door was suddenly pushed open. Then a fair hand reached in. She hid behind the door and said, "Brother, fill the bathtub with water first, then put on a towel. Then I'll put it on for you." Jiang Jioshi's eyes darkened as he looked at her hand for a few seconds. Then he stuffed the crutch back and closed the cabinet. He didn't scare her. Instead, he filled the tub with water, pulled the towel, and casually draped it over his lower body. Then he said, "I'm done. You can come in." Wei Wei Bai walked in slowly. She lowered her head and wished she hadn't seen anything. Her ears were sharp. Jiang Jioshi did not move. Instead, his deep eyes fell on her. There was a dangerous light in his eyes. Wei Wei Bai moved to the side of the bathtub. Her eyes accidentally fell on him for less than half a second. She immediately handed it over. "Can you put it on yourself?" Big brother. He was not a quadriplegic, so how could he not be able to wear them himself? Jiang Jioshi thought for a few seconds and slowly shook his head. "I need to dry myself." There were still many water stains on his body. Wei Wei Bai trembled and her face flushed, but she still firmly took a clean towel. From the beginning to the end, her eyes were floating. He looked at the sky and the earth, but not at Jiang Jioshi. Her hands carelessly brushed his back, his neck, his chest. His muscles were visible to the naked eye, and his beautiful skin was firm and powerful. Even if it was his legs, they were actually not ugly. One of his calves was a little twisted, and the muscle atrophy could not be seen. Of course, Wei Wei Bai did not look. She was so shy that her whole body was trembling. Occasionally, her eyes would fall on his body, but she would quickly look away. Jiang Jioshi's eyes had a surging impulse, especially when he saw the tip of her nose and ears. He could not help but tilt his lips. But in the end, he did not do anything. Instead, he cooperated with Wei Wei Bai, sat on the edge of the bathtub, and put on his clothes. This process was uncomfortable for both of them. Wei Wei Bai did her best to drag Jiang Jioshi into the room and stuff him on the bed. Is at https://www.sashu.com/. Chapter 2001. She felt as if her arms were about to break. Jiang Jioshi felt that the way she threw him was similar to throwing a pig. But when he saw that she couldn't help but rub her arms, he knew that she was sore. After all, he was so heavy. She could drag him so many times without letting go of his hand to let him fall. It was already not easy. Wei Wei Bai covered Jiang Jioshi with a blanket. Then, "Brother, good night." With that, she got up and was about to leave. Her wrist was suddenly grabbed by Jiang Jioshi. The strength of his fingers made Wei Wei Bai flinch. Jiang Jioshi's gaze was a little strange. There was hesitation and gentleness in his eyes. "Tonight, you can just stay here." Wei Wei Bai, "But, Jiang Jioshi, is there another door restriction? Didn't his useless parents run away?" Of course, even if they ran overseas, they were still under his control. Wei Wei Bai shook her head hesitantly. "No, I'll sleep on the sofa then." Jiang Jioshi saw that she was looking at him obediently, without any evil thoughts. Her eyes were filled with a sense of security and trust. Whatever evil thoughts he had, when he saw those eyes, he couldn't arouse them. It felt as if he was blaspheming a child. Jiang Jioshi knew that he was disabled. She thought that he couldn't stand up, so naturally, she trusted him. She didn't know how dangerous she was now. He clasped her wrist and pulled her onto the bed in an instant. Then, he took off her clothes and tied her hands. She didn't have any chance to get out of bed. Jiang Jioshi lowered his eyes to hide the evil thoughts in them. He slowly exhaled. Then he said, "There's a guest room next door. It's cleaned every day. It's very clean. You can sleep there. It's not safe for a girl to go out so late." Wei Wei Bai's eyes lit up. She held his hand. He pursed his lips and tensed his jaw. Wei Wei Bai smiled until her almond-shaped eyes curved. "Thank you, big brother. I like you so much." These words were heartless and completely untrustworthy. It was just like how little girls like candy and clothes. An impulse that was not worth mentioning. But Jiang Jioshi stared at her blankly for a few seconds. Then he let go of her hand and said expressionlessly, "Okay, then go to sleep." Wei Wei Bai nodded. "By the way, do you have any clothes here?" I want to take a bath. Jiang Jiushi was silent for a while before he said with some difficulty, "No, but I can lend you my clothes. You can pick from the closet." He was about to let her go. Wei Wei Bai let go of his hand and immediately ran to the closet to get a shirt and trousers. Then she smiled and said, "Then I'm going. Good night, brother." Jiang Jiushi's body stiffened. His fingers gripped the bed as he finally said, "Good night." The night was long. He resisted the urge to get up and open the door to the guest room. He definitely couldn't let go tomorrow. He had to let her know what her status was. She wasn't a maid. She should wear a shirt and walk around for him to see. Ding! The male lead's affection has increased to 15. Transmigration system. Male god, come here. 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 You can see it when you open the bookshelf next time. If you like Transmigration system, male god, come here. Chapter 2002. Jiang Jiushi didn't know if it was because he tossed and turned too late. When he woke up, Wei Wei Bai had already left. When he opened the door to his room, he saw a sticky note on his door. Beautiful and elegant handwriting. "Brother, I'm going to the dance troupe to rehearse. I didn't dare to disturb you when I saw that you were asleep. By the way, the nanny came early to make breakfast. I had porridge and youtiao. It was delicious. Thank you for your hospitality." He stared at the note for a long time before taking it down. He was going to throw it away, but for some reason, he hesitated and put the note in the economics book he often read. He used his crutches and limped to the kitchen. The nanny knew his schedule. He woke up late today because he didn't like outsiders to clean up the house and cook. So after the nanny finished cooking and put it in a thermos, she would automatically leave. Jiang Jiushi took the food to the dining table. He didn't like to be too wasteful. After all, he had suffered when he was young. He felt that there was no need to cook a table full of dishes that one person couldn't finish. So, 3 meals a day were minimalistic. This morning, the nanny fried youtiao and steamed buns. A few side dishes. A big pot of thin porridge. Jiang Jiushi usually ate very quickly, but when he thought about how Wei Wei Bai also sat in his seat to eat breakfast, he couldn't help but take the youtiao and eat with the porridge. It was delicious. Jiang Jiushi, who usually couldn't be bothered to pay attention to the taste of food, couldn't help but smile. He didn't know how other people raise their little lovers, but he knew that if he raised Wei Wei Bai like this, his mood would become better and he wouldn't lose anything. Wei Wei Bai didn't seem to be like her parents at all. He wanted to hate her, but when he thought of that pair of beautiful and clean almond-shaped eyes, he couldn't hate her. After all, when her parents hit him, she wasn't there. And at that time, she was only a little girl. She must be about the size of a glutinous rice ball. No matter how much a normal person hated someone, they couldn't hate the youngest child in that family. Because a rational person knew that no matter how big the hatred was, it was impossible to ignore it. It had nothing to do with the child. And Jiang Jiushi was a man who was rational to the point of being cold. Otherwise, he wouldn't have climbed to such a high place. In the end, revenge was only one of the reasons for him to move forward. He cruelly looked at his crippled foot. He was still able to live his life in an orderly manner without letting hatred destroy him. As a result, Wei Wei Bai's family was forced to the brink of bankruptcy by him. Her parents had also fled abroad. Even at this point, he was still calm and rational. He was not a loss because he had lost the target of his hatred. This was also the reason why he could remain calm and gentle when facing Wei Wei Bai. He even felt that if she could continue to be so obedient, he could play with her for a while longer. Jiang Jiushi ate the porridge and couldn't help but smile. He seemed to have softened his heart towards Wei Wei Bai. Ding! The male lead's favorability is at 18. Wei Wei Bai, who was stretching her legs, couldn't help but tremble when she heard the notification. Here it comes again. These planes always increased favorability crazily in the beginning. Then later on, there was an inexplicable big pit that made her jump lame. She didn't feel happy at all about these easily obtained favorability points. The system was tidying up the ball of wool when it heard the notification and said, "This plane is very easy to attack. It seems that your little white flower is especially popular." Fast crossing system. Prince Charming, come over here. Fast crossing system. Prince Charming, come over here. // fast crossing system. Prince Charming, come over here. Fast crossing system. Prince Charming, come over here. You can see it when you open the bookshelf next time. If you like, fast crossing system. Prince Charming, come over here, comma. Chapter 2003. Although Wei Wei was in the state of a little white flower, it was especially irritating. But the system had to admit that many men did fall for this. Wei Wei bent down and said calmly, "In the beginning, it is easy to increase the favorability, but men like Jiang Jiushi are only interested in novelty. In the later stages, if I keep being a little white flower, I might not be able to increase the favorability." Although she heard that the favorability was increasing rapidly, in her heart, she did feel that it was easy for a little white flower to seduce men. But when she thought about how Jiang Jiushi climbed up from the bottom step by step, she was a little unconfident in her current state. Because Jiang Jiushi was obviously very rational. He could deal with hatred and all kinds of pain rationally. He didn't need a little white flower to save his gloomy life. He wasn't even afraid of her looking at his crippled leg. He was obviously very confident in himself. He could rely on his personal charm and ability to stand in this world. So the path of redemption was not easy to walk. Jiang Jiushi obviously didn't need redemption. It was enough for him to redeem himself. Wei Wei went through the process of the strategy in her heart. Then she jumped up and decided that if the little white flower didn't work in the later stages, then she would directly use the body to seduce him. The system saw Wei Wei's scheming expression. Holding the ball of wool, it suddenly felt a little sympathetic for the male lead. Anyway, no matter how many planes there were, Yi Yuxuan's fragments would be firmly eaten by Wei Bai. After all, whether it was the red line or the soul favorability accumulated from so many planes, it would make each fragment instinctively feel close to each other. So if there were no accidents later, Wei Bai's strategy journey would become more and more smooth. Hopefully, the strategy could be completed safely. Then she would dump Yi Yuxuan. The two of them could be happy for the rest of their lives. Thinking of this, the system was even more motivated to knit sweaters. It even ate the biscuits sparingly. Jiang Jiushi listened to the content of the meeting. The focus this year would be on expanding the international market. Luan Shan's report was very rigorous and professional. However, Jiang Jiushi held a fountain pen in his hand and tapped on the folder, although his eyes were very indifferent. However, Luan Shan only realized that his boss seemed to be in a daze after reporting for a long time. In a daze? The sound of Luan Shan gradually faded away. Jiang Jiushi suddenly looked up. "Didn't you eat?" Luan Shan immediately shouted. However, Jiang Jiushi felt a sense of irritation in his heart. He suddenly flipped open a document. She pointed at the plan and said, "This is this year's advertising contract. Have you found a spokesperson?" Luan Shan immediately flipped through the piles of neatly arranged documents beside him. They had found a candidate to be the spokesperson for the advertising contract. "We've already chosen 15 celebrities. They're all available, but we still need to hold a meeting to decide who the spokesperson will be." Jiang Jiushi flipped through the information of those celebrities. He threw it away in less than 10 seconds. None of them are good enough. They aren't immortal enough. This year, his company's image advertisement needed a pure young girl. This was because to enter the international market, they needed to have local characteristics. All the final advertisements that were finalized were in an ancient style. The ancient style that was very familiar to Chinese people was very strange and new to foreign countries. They had already released a few beautiful ancient-style videos on foreign social media sites in advance. The response was very good. Luan Shan immediately asked, "Then let's continue to look." Jiang Jiushi tapped the table with his fountain pen, as if hesitating about something. His long and narrow eyelashes covered his obscure black eyes. His handsome face seemed to have thought of something, and there was a hint of gentleness on it. // Chapter 2004. Let's have an interview session and let those who are qualified to participate in it go through it. After he finished speaking, he said slowly, I also have a candidate here. You can add her into the information. Wanshan couldn't help but ask, who is it? Jiang Jiushi looked up at him and said gloomily, I'll give you the information later. Wanshan also understood. Who else could it be? In terms of beauty, who could compare to Wei Wei Bai? Was Jiang Jiushi addicted to playing? Wanshan silently wrote Wei Wei Bai's name on the document. Jiang Jiushi threw his pen aside and said, I'll get off work first. Wanshan said, Wasn't Jiang Jiushi a workaholic? Why did he get off work early? Jiang Jiushi lazily looked up and said, Do you have a problem with that? Wanshan immediately shook his head. No. You have to rest early to get better. This company depends on you. You must be healthy. Jiang Jiushi thought, why does it sound so awkward? This flattery is not up to standard. He got off work early and took the car to the dance troupe. His personal assistant pushed his wheelchair into the dance troupe. The dance troupe was still rehearsing. Wei Wei Bai was almost done with her rehearsal today. She was wearing the kind of dance costume that was specially made for dance practice. Her slender and beautiful figure was undoubtedly revealed under the tight-fitting costume. Jiang Jiushi entered the dance troupe's dance studio. He happened to see Wei Wei Bai with a red face and looking down at the teacher, listening to something seriously. Finally, she revealed a bright smile and raised her hand to shout to the teacher, Yes, teacher. After that, she turned around and took a deep breath. Then she nimbly turned around, stretched her limbs, and stood on her tiptoes. She was as light as a snowflake falling. She jumped up and landed lightly, staying in the air for an unbelievably long time. This was the talent of dancing, a talent that could be seen with the naked eye. Jiang Jiushi saw a small part of her exposed calf. Because of the tremendous force, faint blue veins could be seen. Very beautiful. She had never seen such a beautiful child. Unbelievably clean and soft. The teacher praised her. Wei Wei Bai happily reached out to touch the back of her head and smiled shyly. The way she smiled was so cute and pure that people couldn't help but want to smile as well. Jiang Jiushi's heart skipped a beat. It seemed that he had never seen anything too beautiful, so he indulged Wei Wei Bai a little more. This kind of indulgence was more like making up for the lack of youth. There was no desire, only a heart full of joy. Wei Wei Bai seemed to have finished rehearsing. She ran to change her clothes. Jiang Jiushi also silently asked his assistant to put the wheelchair at the door and waited quietly. Suddenly, he thought of something and said to his assistant, Go buy a bunch of red roses. The assistant immediately nodded and ran off to buy flowers. There were several flower shops nearby. After all, the dance troupe was very famous. The flower shops here were very lively. After the flowers were bought, Jiang Jiushi received them. For the first time, he was a little nervous. After all, this was the first time he personally sent flowers. When Wei Wei Bai walked out, she was wearing a simple t-shirt and trousers. She carried a bag and a pair of dancing shoes. When she saw Jiang Jiushi, she blinked in disbelief and then rushed over happily. Brother, are you here to pick me up? She didn't seem to know how to feel embarrassed at all. When someone came to pick her up, she was happy and took it for granted. But this kind of initiative and enthusiasm was not annoying at all. Jiang Jiushi couldn't help but smile. His breathing paused slightly, but he still handed the roses in his hand to her. Is at https://www.sashu.com/. Chapter 2005. This is for you. I hope that everything will go well with your stage play. Bai Weiwei's eyes lit up, and she immediately held it in her hands. She leaned her head against the petals of the flower, and the soft petals touched her delicate skin. She was so beautiful that it made others look askance. Jiang Jiushi stared at her for a while before unnaturally looking away. Wei Wei Bai smiled happily. Thank you, brother. Jiang Jiushi couldn't help but smile. Her smile was really infectious. Suddenly, he said softly, It's good that you like it. Wei Wei Bai hugged the flower, her almond-shaped eyes bright. Suddenly, she bent down and kissed him gently on the forehead. The gentleness of this touch fell into his heart. Jiang Jiushi didn't react for a moment. He held the armrest with both hands, his fingers a little tight. Wei Weibai seemed to think that this was very normal. This is a thank you gift for brother. Jiang Jiushi pursed his lips, and his eyes suddenly turned cold. Do you always give people gifts like this? Wei Weibai hugged the flower and blinked innocently. Her tone was very pure. No, I like brother. That's why I'm so close to you. Other than my parents, you're the first person I've given a thank you gift. Parents. Jiang Jiushi thought about how he had been treated like the scum of the Bai family, although it was a little uncomfortable. But in his heart, he couldn't deny that he enjoyed this kind of closeness. He coughed lightly. I'll treat you to a meal. Unknowingly, his tone toward her was no longer that of a command, but rather a strong, questioning tone. Wei Weibai hugged the flower and walked to his side. She didn't refuse at all. Okay, brother. The assistant pushed the wheelchair. Wei Weibai and Jiang Jiushi walked side by side. She smiled and talked about some cute things in the dance troupe. It seemed that to her a little happy thing could be magnified 10 times. Jiang Jiushi's expression softened. Her personality and pure heart made this man, who was rolling in the darkness, feel a little relaxed and peaceful. Jiang Jiushi suppressed a trace of desire in his heart. He felt that it would be good to maintain this relationship for a while. After dinner, Wei Weibai waved and left. Jiang Jiushi also waved his hand. It was another day of peace. However, Wei Weibai turned her head with a cold expression. She said solemnly, I can't increase my favorability anymore. She always acted like a happy girl, which made Jiang Jiushi laugh a few times. In the end, her favorable impression of him remained at 20 and couldn't go any higher. As expected, the purity of a child could only arouse some fresh and beautiful feelings in men. And then there was nothing else. Because a man wouldn't have any extra feelings for a childlike, innocent person unless he was a pedophile. Even though it was a favorable impression of 20 points, it wasn't the type of love. So you're not acting like a little white flower anymore? Wei Weibai said, No, but a little white flower is also a woman. I have to let Jiang Jiushi know this. Otherwise, the favorability of love won't increase. Am I supposed to get affection points? With Jiang Jiushi's personality, even his biological parents couldn't get 100 favorability points. Wei Weibai shouldn't even think about it. How about you take off your clothes and pounce on him? Wei Weibai said. Am I such an impure person? The system didn't want to say anything. Sure enough, Bai Weiwei answered her own question. Yes, I'm that impure. The next day Jiang Jiushi came to find her, and then the two of them had a good night together. / Download the at https://m sashu.com// to make it easier for you to read it next time. You can click save to record this chapter. Chapter 2006. She made Jiang Jiushi relax again, and then there was no more and then. His impression of her didn't increase at all. Wei Weibai felt that her face was about to stiffen from smiling. Indeed, not everyone could be a pure little angel. She wanted to be a little devil. She wanted to make Jiang Jiushi, this ascetic, go crazy. He rubbed her smile for nothing and didn't give her any impression of him. Scumbag. Wei Weibai gritted her teeth for a few days. Finally, there was a turn for the better. Jiang Jiushi's company invited her to interview for the annual spokesperson. There was a talent show in the interview. Wei Weibai immediately agreed. She also wanted to interact more with Jiang Jiushi at work. She wanted to stimulate him more and make him think better. It wasn't so polite. Jiang Jiushi was very rational. He especially suppressed himself. So as long as she was too childish, he would still maintain a little pure indulgence for her. Wei Weibai said that she didn't need him to be so considerate of her. On the day of the company's interview, more than 10 beautiful celebrities came. They were all invited internally. The celebrities were so beautiful that they almost made people blind. Except for Wei Weibai, who was a novice. Those celebrities were used to big scenes. They went in one by one. Wei Weibai was the last one. She was still dressed properly in her little white shoes, dress, and ponytail. She was especially cute and innocent. When they walked in, there were 7 or 8 interviewers. Jiang Jiushi sat in the middle, and looked at the information on the document with his head lowered. He didn't seem to know that Wei Bai was here at all. When Wei Bai saw Jiang Jiushi, there was a hint of surprise on her face. Then she smiled brightly. Jiang Jiushi saw it from the corner of his eye, and the corner of his eye twitched. She was too careless. She didn't know that this spokesperson could change a person's life. What a child. Although Jiang Jiushi was still interested in her childishness, the stifling feeling in his heart was slowly emerging. But every time he saw Wei Bai smiling like she didn't know anything about the world, he felt that he was throwing his hatred at her. Wasn't it too irrational to destroy her purity? Jiang Jiushi admitted that he was not a good person, but he wasn't a pervert who would rebel for no reason. It was rare for Wei Bai to evoke a little compassion in him. He felt that he should make her parents destitute and miserable. Just let her go this time. Jiang Jiushi taps the folder with his fingers. After all, her happy smile these days really makes him relax. Wei Bai introduced herself. The interviewer at the side described a scenario. Then, he asked her to dress up and play the part. This scene was set in a peach blossom forest. She was wearing fairy-like dresses and anklets with jingling bells. The barefoot girl stepped lightly on the petals as she approached. She was a peach blossom spirit. This was the style of one of the apps in the endorsement product. It was a little enchanting. After all, Wei Bai's appearance was very fairy-like, so he planned to let her try out different styles. If she could control it, then all kinds of styles would be fine. Jiang Jiushi was still hesitating whether to let Wei Bai go. The sound of the bell suddenly stopped. It tickled his eardrums. The background music of the peach blossom spirit was a gouging mixed with the faint sound of drums. The rhythm was slightly gorgeous and pleasant. Jiang Jiushi raised his head a little slowly. Suddenly, his eyes met a peach blossom red figure. The corners of her eyes were painted peach blossom red, and there was a cinnabar mole between her eyebrows. She was very pure and enchanting. Even her footsteps were not as regular as usual. Instead, her buttocks and legs swayed slightly. Her posture was like the sound of bells, and every step she took tugged at everyone's nerves. The skirt was short, and as it swayed, the color of her legs could be seen under the skirt. The white and exquisite skin under the red was soul-stirring beauty. Amidst this enchantment, her eyes were still pure. Her gaze fell on Jiang Jiushi. Suddenly, she revealed a seductive and innocent smile. She was like a newborn spirit, naturally seductive and coquettish, but she had an indulgence and charm that did not know the affairs of the world. Her spiritual aura was oppressive, and every step she took had a seductive effect. Jiang Jiushi felt his calm heartbeat quicken. The air was suddenly as hot as fire. He stared at her in a daze. This time, he could not move his eyes away at all. It was as if his eyes were tightly grabbed by her. His back went numb to the back of his head. Suddenly, she revealed a brilliant smile at him. She tiptoed and gave a light kick. Her delicate and soft body was as smooth as water. The legs under the skirt were more attractive than willow branches in the wind. The bell rang, and her dress fluttered. It was as if a peach blossom spirit had run out. Jiang Jiushi knew that she was beautiful and that she danced well. However, the dance he saw her dance the most was the jade flower. The jade flower was pure, without a demon. But today, she tiptoed and bent down. Her every move carried a hot and sweet aura. Jiang Jiushi belatedly realized that he had been seduced. Completely seduced, without a trace of leeway. His eyes were a little red, and his fingers were tightly clenched. The trace of pity in his heart. It was shattered. He could not let her go. Ding! The male lead's favorability is at 25. Full text // Download. Chapter 2007. After Wei Bai was done seducing him, she put on her white shoes, a knee-length dress, and tied her hair into a ponytail. That seductive look just now was like someone else's imagination. She even purposely gave Jiang Jiushi a cute and pure smile. But Jiang Jiushi only glanced at her and looked away. Next was to wait for the notification. So Wei Bai happily picked up her bag, turned around, and left. Jiang Jiushi looked at her back view as she left. His eyes were deep and hot. He lowered his eyes silently. He listened to the interviewer's praises. She's so beautiful. I think it's good to use such a newcomer. Did you see the way she walks? It's so seductive. She's so pure and seductive. Her ability to wear ancient costumes is top-notch. And her face is so beautiful that it's natural. Wan Shan saw that the comments were flying in an unpredictable direction. He couldn't help but cough a few times, interrupting the interviewers. Didn't they see how scary Jiang Jioshi's eyes were? Talk, my ass. Jiang Jioshi listened to the comments around him. The more he listened, the colder his expression became. He looked at the information on his table. Wei Wei Bai's beautiful identification photo was looking at him with a smile. Jiang Jioshi looked up. Have you decided who you want to vote for? The interviewers expressed their opinions excitedly. Number 16, the last one. It's that newcomer. She'll definitely be popular. Jiang Jioshi's fingers touched Wei Wei Bai's photo unhurriedly. You're all voting for her? The interviewers nodded. All of them felt that there was nothing wrong with their taste and sense of beauty. However, Jiang Jioshi did not say anything. Instead, she swept her gaze across all the interviewers present with an especially cold gaze that contained traces of gloominess. Wan Shan silently hid to the side. He had just realized that something was wrong with Jiang Jioshi. This group of idiots kept on praising him. She couldn't wait to let Jiang Jioshi know that all of them had seen Wei Wei Bai's thighs. Jiang Jioshi curled his lips coldly. She's indeed very good. It's good that she's not blind. The interviewer was also a shrewd person. It was so cold that he wished he could put on a few more woolen jackets. Immediately, everyone trembled in fear and didn't dare to speak. Jiang Jioshi closed a folder and said coldly, "Go and choose another one. Number 16 has failed." After that, Jiang Jioshi pushed his wheelchair and left. His fingers were clenched so tightly that they hurt. He felt that when she turned into a peach blossom spirit and came out just now, she didn't just seduce him. Instead, everyone present had been seduced by her. Jiang Jioshi wished he could gouge out everyone's eyes. When he saw the group of interviewers recommending Wei Wei Bai just now, he was stunned. A paranoid and frightening thought flashed through his mind. If Wei Wei Bai succeeded in becoming the spokesperson, then her posture and talent would be amazing. All of them could make her famous. At that time, she would be in the public eye in all kinds of ways. He didn't want her to be coveted by others. This was good. It was enough for her to stay by his side silently. She didn't need to go out and show her face. So even if he knew that she was the best candidate for the spokesperson, he wouldn't let her have a chance to enter the entertainment industry. Jiang Jioshi knew that he was selfish, but he didn't feel guilty or embarrassed at all. If there was a trace of thought of letting Wei Wei Bai go before, when she walked out just now and seduced him with such an enchanting smile, it was gone. Wei Wei Bai rehearsed her dance seriously. The system looked at the male lead. The male lead seemed to be very serious in a meeting. Although his favorability had increased, he hadn't come to look for Wei Wei by these few days. Is it https://www.sashu? Come to make it easier for you to read next time. You can click. Chapter 2008. Looking at the host side, the host was addicted to pretending to be a little white flower, twisting her hips and dancing like a crane. It had been a few days, but the male lead had not come. Wei Wei Bai had not come either. Host, didn't you want a seduction strategy? It had been listening to Wei Wei Bai's nagging for the past few days. The system felt that the host had no bottom line, but in this world, she had such a fairy-like shell. She was even more shameless. Wei Wei Bai easily did a split. Are my legs soft? The system. Yes. Wei Wei Bai bent down. Are my waist soft? The system, soft. Wei Wei Bai. That's right. Can't you see that I'm working on my hardware? Look, I'm soft everywhere. Uncle John's heart softened. Seduction must be natural, not pretentious. The system. So are you cooking noodles? Damn it. Being soft everywhere could seduce people. Humans were really weird. Wei Wei Bai finished rehearsing and said calmly, "Don't be afraid. Jiang Jioshi is not a good person. I'll let him know that I'm a woman. He won't refuse the meat in front of him." Jiang Jioshi, that man. To put it bluntly, He was black-hearted to the core, disabled, walking alone in the dark, humiliated to grow up. Parents dead, death without a trace of light. Only interests and coldness intertwined to form his life. Because she was rational enough when she started being childish. He could not do it, not because he was kind. It was because he had no feelings for girls who were pure to the point of lust. Even if he had feelings, it was the feeling of teasing a pet. Now that Jiang Jiushi had feelings, she just had to wait for him to come to her door and be the bad guy. The system was a loss. I don't think the male lead is that bad. He was quite gentle. Wei Weibai chuckled. I don't believe that I can't be the spokesperson. I don't believe that Jiang Jiushi didn't do anything to me. Previously, he had planned to let her be the spokesperson. That was why she was asked to participate in the interview. In the end, she seduced him during the interview. Without hesitation, he immediately cut off her path to the top. How could such a man not be black-hearted? And this was when the favorable impression points weren't high. In the future, once the favorability level increased, that possessive and paranoid state would be even scarier. In the end, Wei Weibai sighed. After seeing so many perverts, it's not rare anymore. Jiang Jiushi was just a psychopath who hid her abilities well. After all, not everyone was a dog from the Xia country. If they said that they were black, they would be black. Her heart was quite cute. The system silently picked up the needle. It suddenly felt that it was quite good to be alone. Neither the host nor the male lead were good people. He had to stay away from them. Wei Weibai carried her bag and casually walked out with her dancing shoes. A male dancer in the same group followed her out. Because it was on the way, the two laughed and chatted for a while. When they went out, they waited for the bus together. The male dancer said, "You dance really well. Your foundation is very solid, and you are very talented." Dancing required talent. It was not something that could be done by just practicing. Wei Weibai said, "I don't have any talent. I just practice more." Speaking of talent, who doesn't have talent? You too. Your dance is very strong, and your posture is very neat. The male dancer immediately laughed. He patted his arm. Not only do I have strength in my jumping, but my arms also have strength. When I lift you up, I definitely feel very safe. Chapter 2009. You can search Transmigration System. Adonis, you can come to Sashu. Come on Baidu to find the. When they were rehearsing, one of the dance moves was a lift. Wei Weibai stared at his arm curiously and opened her hands. Try lifting me. The system reminded her, the male lead is looking at you. Looking at you, Little white flower is not a fickle woman. Wake up, host. Wei Weibai smiled and swatted away the system's words like swatting a mosquito. The male dancer immediately reached out his hands excitedly, grabbed her waist, and lifted her up. Wei Weibai exclaimed, then realized that his arms were really strong. They did not even tremble. She smiled. It's very safe. Please guide me in the future. The male dancer immediately put her down. It's because you're very light. The bus arrived because the two of them were on different buses. The male dancer got on first. Wei Weibai continued to wait. The two of them waved goodbye happily. In the black car, not far away, Wan Shan, who was reporting to the princess, shivered and stayed away from Jiang Jiushi. He did not see anything. Jiang Jiushi's gaze fell outside and saw Wei Weibai smiling happily. He silently looked away. The dark storm gathering in his eyes made people shudder. What a naughty child, he muttered softly. Then he said, let's go. He originally wanted to pick her up and play a pure game with Wei Weibai, then think of a way to do it. But now there was no need. He was not looking for her. She would not think of him. She never lacked people to play this kind of game with her. He was not special at all. The game between the little princess and the little prince ended. He was going to turn back into a wizard. The system said the male lead left, very angry. The silly smile on Wei Weibai's face disappeared. She looked calm. It's nothing. I just wanted to stimulate him. If not, how could she speed up the pace of the game? The system looked at its host's calm face. It could not remember how scared she was at the beginning. Look at her now. She was like a big boss. Once a person gained experience, their improvement was simply too obvious. About a week later, Wei Weibai suddenly received a call from a classmate. It was a class reunion. Wei Wei Bai raised her eyebrows. She had changed her phone number, but these old classmates could still find her. Moreover, ever since he had provoked Jiang Jiushi that day, he had been very careful. She was followed by two very professional bodyguards, who seemed to be specially hired. Like a ghost, he was silently monitoring her. This was only 25 points of favorable impression. It was just the temptation on the surface of the skin. How could he make Jiang Jiushi like this? Bai Weiwei wondered, was this too much of a provocation? She still attended the class reunion. After all, she had to find an opportunity to see if she could push the progress of the strategy. He didn't expect to succeed in defeating Jiang Jiushi. She wanted a hug or something. The class reunion was held in a 5-star hotel in the city. Wei Wei Bai went to participate in the party with a silly and sweet look on her face. Everyone seemed to be happy and harmonious. She did not see Jiang Jiushi's shadow. Wei Wei Bai thought that Jiang Jiushi would come here to meet her or something. In the end, she did not see Jiang Jiushi's shadow, even after dinner. Wei Wei Bai silently thought about what he wanted to do. After dinner, someone suggested to sing karaoke. Immediately, a bunch of people responded. The person who organized this class reunion was the richest young master in their school, Lin San. There was free food and gifts. Everyone who came to participate was especially happy. Lin San seemed to be doing well. He was also considered handsome. He was not a playboy. It was said that after graduation, he had been helping out at home. He was doing well. Chapter 2010. While they were singing karaoke, Lin San suddenly said to Wei Wei Bai, I'll buy you a drink. I wish you success. They all knew that Wei Wei Bai was preparing for a large-scale dance play. Wei Wei Bai took the wine glass. Then she heard the system's reminder, it's drugged. It's the kind that adds to the fun. It was commonly known as an aphrodisiac. Wei Wei Bai's hand paused. She was right about this person. Lin San looked at her with clear eyes. Although he was a little guilty, he was not the type to force himself on her. When he gave her the wine, his hand was still trembling. Bai Weiwei drank the wine without batting an eyelid. Then she smiled and said, "Thank you for your kind words." Lin San saw that she drank the wine, and his expression relaxed. However, he did not dare to look at her. Weiwei Bai saw him like this, and a thought came to her mind. In the early stage of the drug, one would feel weak and sleepy. She unconsciously leaned against the sofa. Her mind was clear, but her body could not move. She said to the system, "Where's Jiang Jiushi?" The system said, "Male lead, he's not working. Damn it, he's in the private room next to yours." And the strange thing was, most people were like Wei Wei Bai's private room, a group of people bustling around. However, Jiang Jiushi sat in his wheelchair, holding a wine glass and drinking slowly. Other than the two bodyguards in the private room, there was no one else. Not to mention bustling, it was as cold as a ghost cave. Wei Wei Bai analyzed. I think he's planning to save the damsel in distress. After a few more interactions, he'll naturally confess to me and send me flowers. Then he'll pick a good day to chop me up and eat me. The system, although the host's analysis was usually right, why did it feel that the male lead's eyes were especially dark and perverted this time? The system hugged its sweater silently. It was better not to get involved in a pervert's party. He was such a pure person. He should protect himself. Wei Wei Bai started to feel dizzy. She knew that the drug was taking effect. She opened her eyes and found that there was no one in the private room. Lin San sent everyone away. Only Wei Wei Bai was left. He walked over a little distance. "Wei Wei, are you okay?" Wei Wei Bai could not help but shiver and said, "It's hot." A trace of pity appeared on Lin San's face. He clenched his fist and suddenly walked in front of her. Then he began to tear Wei Wei Bai's clothes. Bai Weiwei looked up in surprise. Her eyes were misty. She knew what he was doing. She still had some strength left, so she resisted with all her might. "What are you doing? Don't come over here. Be away." Lin San laughed bitterly, but he held her down and used all his strength to reveal a sinister smile. "Go ahead and shout. No matter how loud you shout, no one will hear you." Is this the modern version of no one can hear you even if you scream yourself hoarse? Wei Wei Bai was so scared that she cried. Her hands hit Lin San softly. Her whole body was trembling, and she almost fainted. Go away. I'm going to tell my parents. Scum, scum, if you dare to touch me, I'll castrate you. Jiang Jiushi heard this as soon as he entered the room. He felt a chill in his lower body. Then he saw that Wei Wei Bai's clothes were torn, revealing her fair and delicate collarbone. She struggled desperately and cried pitifully. Jiang Jiushi stared at her exposed skin for a while before signaling the bodyguards to go over. The bodyguards went over and threw Lin San to the ground, punching and kicking him. Lin San cooperated and screamed, I was wrong. I was possessed. Please let me go, Mr. Jiang. Jiang Jiushi's voice was as cold as a knife. Scum, people like you deserve to be castrated. Why did Lin San feel that this big shot was speaking the truth and not acting? He had a tough life. His family's small business finally had some income. Jiang Jiushi came to threaten him to be a villain. This was unreasonable. He had a pure life, and it was over just like that. But when he thought of his family's business, he could only admit defeat. And when he beat him up, there was no need to be so real. His ribs were going to break. Jiang Jiushi pushed the wheelchair and came to Wei Wei Bai's side. He was about to pretend to be a good person. Wei Wei Bai had already jumped up and jumped into Jiang Jiushi's arms. His thigh was pressed down by her delicate body. He couldn't help but narrow his eyes in satisfaction. Wei Wei Bai trembled. Brother, I feel uncomfortable. I'm hot. Jiang Jiushi touched her skin. It was burning hot. These drugs were very expensive. They didn't have any side effects on the body, but they could torture people to the point of madness. Jiang Jiushi's voice was extremely gentle. Wei Wei, what's wrong? Brother will take you to take a shower. It won't be hot anymore. Wei Wei Bai started to tear his clothes. Jiang Jiushi gestured, and the bodyguard immediately dragged the dead dog out. Once the door was closed, the atmosphere in the private room was so hot that it exploded. Jiang Jiushi even pretended to decline. Wei Wei, you're drunk. Don't be like this. He shouted as if he was being raped. If one ignored the strength of him hugging her tightly. Wei Wei Bai really thought that she had done that to him when the drug took effect. But Wei Wei Bai was very clear. Jiang Jiushi was a black-hearted pervert. In the end, she didn't take the initiative and even crawled away. He even forcefully dragged her back. It was a tragic night. A tragic night. Chapter 2011. Wei Wei Bai was lying flat on the ground. Jiang Jiushi's favorability had increased to 35 points. She could not understand why Jiang Jiushi, who had a crippled leg, was faster than her. She wanted to run, but when he stretched out his arm, his strength was frightening. In the end, the wheelchair flipped over. The drug had worn off, although her legs were a little weak. But no matter what, she had 2 more healthy legs than Jiang Jiushi. But Jiang Jiushi was like an octopus. After his fingers caught his prey, she couldn't get away no matter how hard she struggled. He was too crazy. Wei Wei Bai expressed that he wasn't human. She underestimated the extent of this beast's black-hearted. At first, she thought that there would at least be a buffer for the confession and romantic date. Hero saving the damsel in distress was fine, but she didn't expect that he would use this opportunity to take advantage of her. Wei Wei Bai said to the system with a haggard face, Tongzi, you didn't see how Jiang Jiushi treated me. He's so shameless. After being blocked for a night, Tongzi's tone was calm with a little surprise. Oh, the favorability increased by 10 points. It seems that you humans are so soft that it's easy to increase favorability. Wei Wei Bai, listen, is this something human would say? Wei Wei Bai thought about it silently and felt that the system made sense. Her favorability increased by 10 points. For a stingy person like Jiang Jiushi, it was easy. It was indeed not easy. She smiled stiffly at him before, but it didn't increase her favorability by many points. After you fell asleep, he kept staring at you. He stared at you for a few hours before waking up. And the reason he woke up was that it was morning. He had to tidy up and bring Wei Wei Bai back. After all, it was so messy in the karaoke room. Anyone would be embarrassed to wake up and see a mess. But even in such a bad environment, Jiang Jiushi was especially happy to see. The pure system of the past seemed to be wrong. The system had never been pure from the start. Jiang Joshi sat in his wheelchair and took some medicine from the nanny. It's for anti-inflammatory purposes. Jiang Joshi couldn't help but laugh. He never thought that he would have to resort to such means one day. He felt that he would be bored after 1 or 2 months. He couldn't find a better lover in such a short time. Jiang Joshi was calm and cheerful. He ordered the nanny to make more breakfast. Then, he pushed the wheelchair into the room. He found that she was still asleep, her long hair scattered on the bedding. Jiang Joshi came to the bedside and saw that her cheeks were pink and she was sleeping like a little angel. Wei Wei Bai's eyelashes trembled, but she did not wake up. Chapter 2012. Jiang Joshi reached out and gently caressed her face a few times. You're too tired. The best time was to let go of her after removing the medicine. Otherwise, she might be suspicious. But later on, his mind did not have that concept at all. The wheelchair flipped over, and she was about to run away. He grabbed her ankle and dragged her back as if he was catching a prey. Otherwise, if she ran too far away, he would not be able to catch her. At that time, the thoughts of a man were very violent and crazy. Wei Bai looked at him in fear later on. She wanted to run away, but could not. Jiang Joshi applied the medicine on her, and then changed the oil. Holding her ankle, there was a large bruise on it. It was scary just looking at it. Jiang Joshi could not help but frown. Wei Bai suddenly opened her eyes, as if she had been stimulated. She just had to coax her a little. She hurriedly slapped his hand away and shouted, "What are you doing?" Jiang Joshi's expression softened. He took the medicine and said softly, "I'll apply the medicine for you." Wei Bai's face turned even redder. She could not breathe and almost suffocated herself to death. She gritted her teeth and said, "I want to go back." With that said, she wrapped herself in the blanket and wanted to leave with a panicked expression. Jiang Joshi's expression turned gloomy for a moment. But soon, he reached out and pulled her blanket fiercely, pulling her whole body back up. Wei. His tone was indifferent and calm. His voice was even a little cold, like a snake spitting out its tongue. Wei Bai was frightened. She seemed to have thought of something and could not help but tremble. "What do you want to do?" Jiang Joshi's eyes were suppressing a sense of darkness, but the smile on his face was very gentle and affectionate. "Do you remember everything?" Wei Bai did not dare to look at his face. She was about to cry. "You..." Jiang Joshi calmly interrupted her. "Last night, I happened to know that Lin San had bad intentions towards you, so I rushed over to save you. In the end, after I saved you, you ignored me and threw yourself at me." Wei Bai hugged herself tightly, revealing a pair of almond-shaped eyes, like a little rabbit that had mistakenly entered a pack of wolves. He seemed to feel that what the big bad wolf said was wrong, but he didn't know how to refute it. Jiang Joshi continued to speak softly for fear of scaring her. "So last night, you were the one who made the mistake first. I'm a cripple, so I couldn't run away. You were the one who wanted to pounce on me." Wei Bai choked. "But you can push me away." Jiang Joshi stared at her with a gaze so focused that it made her scalp tingle. "You're a good-looking girl, and I'm a normal man. Or do you think I don't have normal needs because I can't walk?" Wei Bai saw that he was angry and shook her head in fear. It seemed that his brutal behavior last night had really scared her. Jiang Joshi immediately softened his voice, not wanting to scare her away. "So when you refuse to leave, how could I have the self-control to chase you away? You're so beautiful. No man can reject you, including me. Transmigration system, my idol, come over here. Transmigration system, my idol, come over here. / transmigration system, my idol, come over here. Transmigration system, my idol, come over here. Transmigration system, my idol, come over here." Chapter 2013. Wei Bai's eyes were a little dazed. She stared blankly at Jiang Joshi. It seemed that what he said had a particularly strong impact on the pure her. Jiang Joshi's hand gently landed on her cheek. She immediately trembled, but she didn't avoid it. His tone was low with a hint of bewitchment. "So this mistake was formed. Later on, I was a little anxious and rude and scared you. But you know that I like you very much, so I wanted to hug you. Only 35 points of favorability. He said it as if he was swearing an oath of eternal love. Wei Wei Bai gave Jiang Jiushi the middle finger in her heart. Scumbag. Jiang Jiushi didn't feel guilty or guilty at all for lying. He spoke of his love as naturally as drinking water. Then he changed the topic. It's your first time, and it's my first time too. So the two of us have to be responsible for each other, right? Wei Wei Bai looked like she was fooled. She was a little helpless. But Jiang Jiushi lowered his head sadly. Do you dislike me because I'm a cripple? This was simply standing on a moral high ground to oppress a pitiful girl who had lost her virginity. Wei Wei Bai didn't know how to answer immediately. How could I dislike you? Jiang Jiushi caught her words and looked up at her. There was a glimmer of hope in his eyes. You really don't dislike me? Wei Wei Bai, I don't dislike you. But this is different from last night. Jiang Jiushi hugged her happily. Wei Wei, I'm very happy. Do you know? I've been despised and insulted since I was young. My parents are also dead. I live alone in this world. The world is dark. After meeting you, you're the only one who makes me smile. Wei Wei Bai, this line was a little mushy. Jiang Jiushi said sincerely, my life is very difficult. I can't stand up and walk, but you said you don't dislike me and are willing to be friends with me. Wei Wei Bai, wait a minute. When did she say that she was with him? Jiang Jiushi's body suddenly trembled. He seemed to be very sad. It's okay if you regret it in the future. After all, I'm a cripple. I can't give you happiness. I don't deserve anyone's love. Wei Wei Bai felt goosebumps rising all over her body. The system shuddered as well. He's even more thick-skinned than you. He's even more cultured and knows how to trick people. If it wasn't for the 35 points, it wouldn't have changed at all. Wei Wei Bai really thought that Jiang Jiushi loved her to death. Jiang Jiushi finally raised his head and looked at Wei Wei Bai, who had been fooled. His face was full of joy. He gently placed his hand on her stomach. And we didn't use contraceptive measures last night. You might already have a baby in your stomach. Wei Wei Bai was really lame. She knelt down to Jiang Jiushi. Was this the legendary scumbag who shamelessly fooled around with little girls' feelings and kicked them away when they were tired of playing with them? Such a black-hearted scumbag. So shameless. What a rare sight. Wei Wei Bai was in a daze. Jiang Jiushi tested her bit by bit and kissed the corner of her eyes. The corners of her eyes were a little red. There were traces of crying from last night. He used a way of controlling the entire situation, making her unable to think. She couldn't even think about his mistakes. She was forced to agree to be with him. Actually, when they first signed the contract, he should have done this to her. Now, he was just doing what he wanted to do when they first met. But it wasn't pleasant to be together unwillingly. So, he used such a method to make Wei Wei Bai agree and not blame him. Chapter 2014. This wasn't very good. Of course, this method could only fool her for a while. After a while, Wei Wei Bai might come to her senses and not be fooled by him so easily. But so what? Anyway, it would take at least 2 or 3 months, and at most 7 or 8 months. He would get sick of it. Jiang Jiushi was so calm that he cruelly reflected on himself. Men were all greedy for novelty, and after seeing so many women, they were used to it. So, fooling her was for both parties to get through this contract period happily. Jiang Jiushi, whose heart and lungs were full of holes, showed traces of evil coldness in his eyes. Of course, it disappeared quickly and became pure sincerity. Jiang Jiushi's comforting made Wei Wei Bai dizzy. Her series of questions turned into question marks in her eyes, followed by self-reflection. She seemed to wonder if she had done something wrong. Jiang Jiushi observed her expression and found that he had succeeded in fooling her. Wei Wei Bai suddenly pushed him and said with some repulsion, "Get up." He was stunned, but he didn't object. He immediately got up and left her, not taking advantage of her at all. Then he said, "Did I press on you? Are you in a lot of pain?" As he asked, he got up and pulled the wheelchair beside the bed. Then he moved his body with difficulty to sit in the wheelchair. But because he didn't have enough strength, the process was a bit awkward. Jiang Jiushi struggled to put one leg on the wheelchair, but the other leg couldn't get up. Suddenly, a fair hand stretched out from under the blanket and supported his knee with force, giving him a push. Jiang Jiushi sat in the wheelchair smoothly. Wei Wei Bai saw that he was sitting properly and immediately retracted her hand. Then she turned her back and said to him, "You go out first, I want to change." The gentle smile on Jiang Jiushi's face gradually turned into a bit of smugness. He said, "Okay, I'll leave the medicine here. You apply it yourself." After saying that, Jiang Jiushi didn't want to fight at all and immediately went out. When the door closed, Jiang Jiushi looked at his knees. Although he did it on purpose, Wei Wei Bai's help still made him feel a little happy. He asked someone to invite her to a class reunion to lower her guard to the lowest. After he arrived, he would play the hero, saving the damsel in distress, and she would throw herself into his arms. She was not resentful of his feelings. No matter what Wei Wei Bai's current mood was, Jiang Jiushi was sure that she definitely wouldn't hate him. That was enough. She might even have a different feeling for him. It didn't matter if this feeling came from sympathy or from the first love. He had used such brutal and forceful methods to get her, and he had used all kinds of plans to keep her firmly in his grasp. All the negative effects would be minimized. Jiang Jiushi slowly pushed his wheelchair away. He was very excited. Ever since the company became successful, he had indeed been dispirited for a period of time. After all, the most difficult and challenging things had passed. The fruit of victory would lose its taste after eating it for a long time. The feeling of revenge didn't seem to be very meaningful. But the process of getting Wei Wei Bai made him feel a rare sense of excitement. So Jiang Jiushi couldn't help but use his dark methods to nibble at her step by step. He liked her a little now. Jiang Jiushi was very clear about his emotional fluctuations, so he didn't mind using more methods to get her. If Wei Wei Bai liked him because of his methods, it would be a happy victory for everyone. If he got tired of her in the future, it would be even easier to abandon her. It was just a matter of saying a word. As for Wei Wei Bai's ending, Jiang Jiushi felt that he definitely wouldn't care at that time. In any case, it was the same as every time he succeeded. The fruit wouldn't taste good after eating for a long time, and then he would find a new fruit. Jiang Jiushi was still feeling smug. His scumbag plan had a good start. In the room, Wei Wei Bai was applying medicine. When it started to hurt, she said to the system, "When the affinity goes up, if I don't torture that scumbag Jiang Jiushi into a dog, I'll follow your family name." The system, "Follow my family name 0? Wei Wei Bai, "No, if I marry you, you'll be my family." I see, sounds good, right? The system, "You scumbags can just put together a bunch of scumbags. Don't pollute this poor person who weaves sweaters for a living." Crossover system, "Prince Charming, come here." Crossover system, "Prince Charming, come here." /crossover system, "Prince Charming, come here." Crossover system, "Prince Charming, come here." Download the at https://m Sashu. Com button at the bottom to record this chapter. Crossover system, "Prince Charming, come here." Chapter 2015. Jiang Jiushi was rarely late. Today, he only came to work when it was almost noon. Wan Shan saw that his face was flushed, so he poured him a cup of coffee and said, "Why? Did you get the person?" He went to such a big scene to trick a little innocent girl. Wei Wei Bai deserved to be unlucky. Jiang Jiushi did not sleep the whole night. His throat was a little dry, and he drank the cup of bitter coffee. He said, "How's the Bai family?" Wan Shan flipped through the information. "You asked someone to go abroad to get that scumbag pair. That scumbag pair is living quite miserably now. Their money had been snatched away. They were staying in the worst hotels, and recently, they were even looking for low-level jobs. They had fallen from the sky to the ground." Jiang Jiushi was silent for a while. "Let's slow down first and let them catch their breath." Wan Shan nodded and did not object. After all, he had just kidnapped someone else's daughter. Even if the parents were scumbags, he had to give them some face. Jiang Jiushi poured himself another cup of coffee and said, "Oh right, contact the doctor. I'm going to have surgery soon." Wan Shan was shocked. "Why are you suddenly so anxious?" One of Jiang Jiushi's feet was seriously crippled. The best result of the surgery was to ensure that he could stand up and walk. Of course, it was definitely not possible for him to jump around like this or run a marathon like others. Moreover, The doctor had also said that even if the surgery was successful, Jiang Jiushi might still limp if he stood up. However, it would depend on the success of the surgery. The best situation was that the limp might not be so obvious. This was because Jiang Jiushi had been exercising for a long time and had been asking professional doctors to massage him. The muscle atrophy was not obvious. Moreover, he could sometimes walk with crutches. Therefore, after hearing that he would still limp after the surgery, Jiang Jiushi was not so interested, although he also had a surgery plan. However, the surgery needed to be placed behind the plan to expand the international market this year. He thought that the earliest he could do the surgery would be at the end of the year or next year. Jiang Jiushi's eyes were dark and his eyelashes drooped. He pondered for a few seconds before replying slowly. I used to find it inconvenient to sit in a wheelchair or hold crutches, but it was still tolerable. After all, he relied on his brain to make a living. Or he could use his mouth to fool people. There was no need to rely too much on physical strength. But I might need to exercise more now. If I only use my hands, it won't be enough. For example, what if Wei Wei Bai ran away? If he couldn't catch her, he would be blinded. If he could stand up, then she would run away in fear. In that case, when he chased after her, it could be considered to be quite interesting. Wan Shan. Why does this sentence contain so much information? However, it was a good thing that Jiang Jiushi was willing to perform the surgery. Wan Shan nodded. Then I'll contact the doctor. You should check the condition of your leg. Jiang Jiushi nodded and began to flip through the documents. All right, get someone to send some feminine products to my house. Also, buy some gifts and flowers. Jiang Jiushi said lightly. Wan Shan nodded casually when he heard this. There were many lovers in the industry. After all, the pressure in this line of work was too great. Who didn't have a few women around them? It was rare for Jiang Jiushi to have one, so he would pick out the better ones and send them over. He just didn't know how long this one would last. Even if he did not say it, he knew Jiang Jiushi very well. Jiang Jiushi was a boss who was only popular for a short period of time. Everything could be considered fresh for a few months. He was afraid that Wei Wei Bai wouldn't be able to hold on for more than a year. The download address is at https://www.sashu.com. Chapter 2016. Jiang Jiushi finished his work excitedly. Then, under Luan Shan's speechless gaze, he got off work early. When he got home, his expression was relaxed and happy. However, when he entered the door, he found that the nanny was still there. But Wei Wei Bai was missing. Jiang Jiushi's heart turned cold. Where's Wei Wei? The nanny said, Are you talking about Miss Bai? She said that she was going to dance, so she left in the afternoon. Also, she said that she won't be coming back in the future. These words made the gentle smile on Jiang Jiushi's face disappear bit by bit. Then, he laughed again, and his laughter was unusually cold. It seemed that Wei Wei Bai still reacted to his words in the morning. Although the two of them had sex, Wei Wei Bai thought that she could pretend that nothing happened. Their bodies were intimate. However, Wei Wei Bai's heart still did not waver. Jiang Jiushi's voice turned cold. Call the chauffeur. The nanny trembled. She did not know who provoked Jiang Jiushi again. After Wei Wei Bai finished dancing, her face was pale. Her bones were all broken, and her lower body hurt everywhere. Every time she felt uncomfortable, Wei Wei Bai would silently tear Jiang Jiushi apart. A 10,000-year-old virgin. His skills were so bad that it was unbearable. She felt that Jiang Jiushi was a scumbag because of this. When it came to that matter, he did not care about her life at all and only cared about his own pleasure. If this kind of man was not her target, she would have kicked his lower body. Wei Wei Bai grimaced. The teacher could see that something was wrong with her and could not help but be concerned. Wei Wei, are you too tired? During Wei Wei Bai's time in the dance troupe, she had successfully won everyone's favor. Who did not like cute little fairies? And when she danced, her spirit was off the charts and her talent was amazing. For the dance troupe to have such a dancer, it meant that the dance troupe had a successor. The teacher was overjoyed. Wei Wei Bai shook her head and revealed a sweet smile. No, I drank too much at the class reunion last night and didn't get enough sleep. The teacher immediately shook her head in disapproval. Then take a day off and have a good rest. You're working so hard. It's okay to rest for a day. Don't tire yourself out. Then, the teacher asked her to go home early. Wei Wei Bai was only here to put on a show. After all, she had to fish for that scumbag Jiang Jiushi. She nodded and limped out with her things. The system reported in real time, the male lead is here. He's in a car 10 meters away from the entrance. His face is as black as an old pot that hasn't been washed. Wei Wei Bai sneered. I'm waiting for him to come. My character setting is that of a little white flower, not a little idiot. Of course I have to show some resistance when I'm being taken advantage of. Does he think that by saying that I'm miserable and pitiful, he can win my sympathy? The system replied perfunctorily, yes, yes. Good luck. Wei Wei Bai. She felt that Tongzi had a new lover. He was becoming less and less attentive to her recently. Tongzi, work hard on the sweater. The sweater is about to be handed in, but it's not done yet. Wei Wei Bai corrected her angelic smile at the door. Her eyes and mouth drooped, looking like she was being bullied. Then, she walked out of the door weakly. Not far away, a black car was parked quietly. Wei Wei Bai inadvertently glanced at it and pretended not to know that Jiang Jiushi was inside. Then, her shoulders drooped and she walked forward alone. She didn't stop at the bus stop either. She seemed absent-minded. When Wei Wei Bai walked to a pharmacy, she suddenly thought of something. She hesitated for a moment, wanting to go in but not daring to. To TXD. Chapter 2017. But in the end, she still walked in. Jiang Jiushi sat in the car. Looking at her sad back view, he was deep in thought. If there was no accident, Wei Wei Bai should have gone to buy emergency contraceptive pills. After all, what he said in the morning might have scared her. It seemed like she really wanted to cut ties with him. Jiang Jiushi looked at the entrance of the pharmacy expressionlessly. The driver, Old Lu, accidentally glanced at the rearview mirror. He was frightened by Jiang Jiushi's cold expression and immediately didn't dare to look again. Wei Wei Bai went for a while and then hurried out with a small, opaque plastic bag. She didn't even take the bus, but waved for a taxi. Jiang Jiushi watched the car drive away and was silent for a while before saying, "Follow her." Old Lu immediately followed. Jiang Jiushi called Luan Shan. "Go to my house and take out the contract. It's the contract that Wei Wei Bai sold herself to me. There are also photos of the bays overseas. Pick the worst ones." A 3-month contract. It was signed by Wei Wei Bai. This kind of contract had no legal effect. But in Jiang Jiushi's hands, even if it had no legal effect, Wei Wei Bai had to accept it. He had many ways to make sure she couldn't escape. A pampered princess was a pampered princess. After being scared once, she cried and ran away immediately. She didn't dare to have anything to do with him. Jiang Jiushi felt that he had to teach Wei Wei Bai to be more mature. At least let her know that some contracts couldn't be signed carelessly. Once she signed, she had to take responsibility. Jiang Jiushi put down his phone and accidentally saw the expression on his face in the car window. It was especially gloomy and scary. In the past few years of his success, such a bloodthirsty expression rarely appeared. Jiang Jiushi slowly closed his eyes. He didn't expect to find out that Wei Wei Bai was planning to escape and not stay by his side. He was actually so angry. Wei Wei Bai returned to her own home. The Bai family's villa was funded by Jiang Jiushi. The company had not really gone bankrupt yet, so the house had not been auctioned. It was just a little bleak. Wei Wei Bai opened the door absent-mindedly and forgot to lock the door. After all, the little princess used to have a nanny open and close the door. Therefore, her behavior was very normal. She took out the pills but found that there was no hot water, so she slowly went to boil some water. Then, Tongzi said, he's here. Spendthrift Jiang, no, male lead Jiang is here. Wei Wei Bai immediately went to pour some water and then put the hot water on the table to cool down. When it was about time, she rubbed her face and held the pills in her hand. Then he began to cry. Without making a sound, her body trembled and she cried like a weeping beauty. But it was both beautiful and pitiful. The door, which was not closed tightly, was slowly pushed open. Jiang Jiushi's gloomy eyes were revealed. Then, he saw her sitting alone on the spacious sofa. In the empty living room, the decorative pendulum clock that had lost its momentum was extremely quiet. This house was lifeless. In the darkness, only her trembling back view was so clear. For a moment, Jiang Jiushi seemed to see himself. In the dark background, there was only one person sitting alone with his back to everyone. But he did not cry. Instead, he was resentful and coldly cursing everyone to die a horrible death. He had never been a good person. He had known since he was young. There was even a person who insulted him who burned both of his hands with the experimental equipment he designed for chemistry class. This kind of cold, witty, and unknown revenge was everywhere. To those who were rotten to him, he sneered at his revenge. The download address is at https://www.sashu.com. Chapter 2018. He was not necessarily grateful to those who were good to him. Instead, he thought about how to make use of others' good intentions to climb up the social ladder. Just like now, when he watched Bai Weiwei cry her eyes out. The thought that flashed through his mind was that she looked really good when she cried. Jiang Jiushi silently pushed the wheelchair in. Weiwei Bai seemed to have heard the sound. She turned around in shock. The corners of her eyes were full of tears as she looked at him with her almond-shaped eyes. When she saw him, she panicked and held the medicine tightly. Jiang Jiushi's expression was very cold. He stared at the medicine in her hand as if he wanted to say something. Weiwei Bai thought that he was going to stop her. She immediately stuffed the pill into her mouth and swallowed it. But the pill was too dry. She choked and coughed. Her face was immediately flushed red. Jiang Jiushi came to the table and handed her a glass of water. Drink some water. Don't hurt your throat. Weiwei Bai looked at him a little fearfully. She seemed to be at a loss. Jiang Jiushi revealed a gentle smile. What's wrong, Weiwei? Drink some water. Weiwei Bai hesitated for a moment. Finally, she reached out and touched the cup. Jiang Jiushi let go of her fingers, and the cups slipped from their fingertips. Crack! The clear glass, along with the water, was smashed into pieces. Weiwei Bai jumped back in shock. Jiang Jiushi calmly and indifferently retracted his hand, the corner of his mouth raised. Are you really that afraid of having a baby in your stomach? Are you afraid that you won't be able to dance when you have a child? Or are you afraid that with my crippled genes, you will give birth to a deformed child? Weiwei Bai immediately shook her head in fear. No, I just feel that we are not suitable. Yesterday was just an accident. Jiang Jiushi stared at her deeply and suddenly smiled. He slowly pushed the wheelchair and crushed the glass shards, making a cracking sound. Weiwei Bai could not help but step back. Jiang Jiushi was not angry, but he suddenly pushed the wheelchair faster and grabbed her hand. His wrist was very strong, so he held her hand. Weiwei Bai could not break free no matter how hard she struggled. Jiang Jiushi smiled. Although his smile was gentle, his eyes were cold. Are you playing with me, Weiwei Bai? Back then, you signed a contract for me. The 3-month contract is not up to you. Are you going to pretend that you did not sign it? Bai Weiwei's face was deathly pale. I didn't expect it to be so difficult. Jiang Jiushi tilted her head slightly, and the smile on her face became even more brilliant. That difficult? Do you think that I pay your company so much money every month just because the wind blows it in? Do you know how much your company is by? More than 300 million. Weiwei Bai was a little confused. More than 300 million? A little princess with no concept of money. Pitiful. She did not even know how much 300 million was. Jiang Jiushi said softly, Yes, I've already paid 100 million. Which woman in this world do you think is worth 100 million? You're the only one, Weiwei. He suddenly exerted strength in his fingers. Weiwei Bai's face turned pale and she trembled in pain. She wanted to break free, but she could not escape from his strength. Jiang Jiushi looked at her fiercely. Do you think I'm easy to bully? Or do I give you the wrong impression that I'm very kind? When you walked into that hotel room, didn't you want to sell yourself? Weiwei Bai was anxious and embarrassed to the extreme. She broke down and shouted, Shut up, Jiang Jiushi. How can you say that? When Jiang Jiushi saw the despair in her eyes. A trace of helplessness flashed across her heart. He seemed to have pushed her too hard. He had clearly planned to treat her gently and open her heart bit by bit. But when he heard that she had run away and even took birth control pills, she looked like she could not wait to get rid of him immediately. He could not stop the anger in his heart. This anger made him lose control completely. He only wanted to rush over and let her see the truth and shatter her delusion of wanting to leave. It seemed like he really liked her and did not see her as a plaything. Jiang Jioshi's heart trembled. Suddenly, his hand trembled and he let go of her wrist. /save button. Chapter 2019. Of course, this thought only flashed by, and Jiang Jioshi was only in a trance for a few seconds before returning to normal. He even felt that his temper had become a lot more rash. He couldn't suppress the anger in his heart and destroyed all his plans of being gentle. Jiang Jioshi reached out and rubbed his temples. He felt that his temples were making a popping sound, and it was very painful. He just wanted to have a decent lover. Why was Wei Wei Bai so disobedient? Why not be ruthless and train her for half a month? Then she would be obedient. There were professional trainers in the upper circle. They were clean, powerful, and confidential. Jiang Jioshi couldn't help but look up at Wei Wei Bai. He realized that she looked like she had done something wrong and was looking at him fearfully. Her face was very red, as if she was angered by him. There was a layer of beautiful light red on her pink and white skin. Her slender figure was so thin that a gust of wind could blow her away. But that pair of obedient and pleasant almond eyes were filled with a sense of stubbornness. It made people feel like they were looking at a pitiful child. It was embarrassing to make things difficult for her. Jiang Jioshi started to have a headache again. He reached out and held his forehead. There was a hint of darkness in his eyes as he looked at her through the gaps between his fingers. He realized that he wanted to hand her over for training. It was something that he couldn't bear. The thought of another man or woman touching her made his blood boil. The bloodlust in his heart surged, and he even had the urge to kill. Maybe he was a clean freak and couldn't bear that his things were contaminated by others. Jiang Jioshi convinced himself. Suddenly, there was a knock on the door. It was Luan Shan. He stood outside the door with a stack of documents. Wei Wei Bai trembled. Like a frightened rabbit, she jumped back a few steps. Jiang Jioshi said coldly, "Come in." It was obviously Wei Wei Bai's house, but it felt like Jiang Jioshi was the owner. Luan Shan came a little trembling. The atmosphere was very tense. Boss Jiang was in a bad mood. Luan Shan handed the documents to Jiang Jioshi. "The documents you asked for, Mr. Jiang." When Jiang Jioshi was in a good mood, he had no problem calling him Brother Jiang. But now, Jiang Jioshi looked like he had ignited a barrel of dynamite. Luan Shan kept his presence very low, for fear that Jiang Jioshi would not bear to attack Wei Wei Bai. He would catch him and beat him as hard as he could. He had seen how Jiang Jioshi had punched his boxing coach's temple, causing the coach to be hospitalized for a month. He almost died on the spot. In the end, he had to spend over $1 million to settle this matter. Later on, Jiang Jioshi's personal trainer's salary was doubled before someone was willing to apply for the job. Jiang Jioshi signaled the Luan Shan. Luan Shan immediately pushed him to the side of the table. Then he saw glass shards under the table. He immediately ran to get the cleaning tools and clean it up. Jiang Jioshi let Luan Shan busy himself. He took out a fountain pen and pulled out Wei Wei Bai's contract. Then he changed the time on the contract. Then he pushed the contract in the direction of Wei Wei Bai. "Come and sign your name again." Luan Shan had already cleaned up. Then he ran to the kitchen, intending to pour some tea or something. When he brushed past Wei Wei Bai, he saw her pitiful, tearful look and couldn't help but shake his head. Of course, he didn't dare to say anything more. Everyone could see that Boss Jiang was personally training Wei Wei Bai. Wei Wei Bai's reaction was a little slow. She didn't go forward. Instead, she hesitated and took a few steps back. Then, she repeated in a low voice, "Jiang Jioshi, I don't want to. Crossover system, Adonis, come over here." Chapter 2020. Jiang Jioshi's gaze was extremely deep, and a sharp and cold light appeared. This gaze was more penetrating than a sharp knife, and it could pierce through one's heart. Oh, you can't stand it? He slowly put down the fountain pen and placed his hands on his abdomen, looking indifferent. What can you stand? I'm easy to negotiate. Tell me, I might even agree. Wei Wei Bai's eyes lit up, but she was still very hesitant. She didn't seem to believe him, but she still said softly, "Can we negotiate?" Jiang Jioshi's expression was very cold for a moment, but it was quickly replaced by a hypocritical smile. Of course, I'm not a bad person. Don't be afraid. Wei Wei Bai looked at him blankly and then said hesitantly, I can satisfy many of your requests, except for physical contact? Jiang Jiushi smiled. What do you mean by physical contact? If I fall, can't you hold me up? Wei Wei Bai immediately shook her head. No, I mean don't do that. Jiang Jiushi paused after every word. What do you want? We have to write it in the contract. You need protection too. If you don't make it clear, the contract won't be effective when the time comes. Wan Shan, who was making tea in the kitchen, heard this sentence. She couldn't help but roll her eyes. This kind of contract for the sale of human beings had no legal effect. Whoever believed that would be an idiot. Bai Weiwei had a frightened expression on her face. Jiang Jiushi looked at her with a cold smile, as if to see how far she could go. If he was angry, then she would be punished. Anyway, she didn't like his gentleness. Then he couldn't be bothered to pretend to be a good person. Wei Wei Bai looked at the contract on the table, and a look of struggle flashed across her face. In the end, she still walked step by step to the table with heavy footsteps. Then she didn't look at the contract, but gently and hesitantly bent over to Jiang Jiushi. The aura on her body immediately wrapped around him. Jiang Jiushi's eyes darkened and his fingers tightened. Wei Wei Bai was afraid that someone would hear her, so she moved closer to his ear. Because her voice was too soft, it sounded more like a seductive, sweet entanglement. It made Jiang Jiushi's sensitive ears redden a little. His heart couldn't help but beat faster. After Wei Wei Bai finished speaking, her face turned even redder. She hesitated and moved away from his ear. Her eyes were so bright that he couldn't bear to lie to her. Did you hear that? Jiang Jiushi stared at her soft and beautiful lips. His breathing became heavy. Then he smiled. I heard you. You don't want to sleep with me. This sentence was a little loud. Wei Wei Bai's lips trembled, and she looked at the kitchen fearfully. However, Jiang Jiushi tilted his head and looked at the kitchen. If you're done watching the show, then get lost. Wan Shan immediately came out with tea, pretending to be calm, and then immediately said, Then I'll leave first. Goodbye. After saying that, Wan Shan fled and helped them close the door tightly. Jiang Jiushi picked up a cup of tea and took a sip to suppress the anger in his chest. His attitude was still strong and indifferent. Wei Wei Bai looked a little scared, as if she was firmly in his control. Jiang Jiushi, who had revealed his true colors, showed his cold temperament and strong methods. Jiang Jiushi acted like he was negotiating a project and said coldly and unreasonably, You know, there's a big difference between the price of selling yourself and not selling yourself. I thought you agreed and signed your name because you were mentally prepared. I'm a kind person with a soft temperament. That's why I'm willing to pay such a high price and treat you so gently. Bai Weiwei, at the / crossover system, Adonis, come here and read the full article at https://www.sashu. Download Transmigration system. Adonis, come here and read this on your phone. https://m. Sashu. com// Next time you open the bookshelf, you'll see it, if you like. Chapter 2021. The target of the strategy was so trashy that she couldn't bear to look at it. Jiang Jiushi had a calm look on his face. Go and check the price in the industry. Who would be able to offer such a high price to save your family? Also, I didn't force you to do what you did last night. Wei Wei Bai, what he said made sense. If she didn't know that he was setting a trap, she would have thought that she didn't know what was good for her. Jiang Jiushi, that's why I've done my best for you. You don't have the right to ask for anything. Wei Wei Bai's face was still slightly red, but he could see the despair in her eyes. Jiang Jiushi didn't want to force her into a daze. He had dealt enough blows to her. He softened his expression. I'm not such an unreasonable person. If you don't like it, I won't force you. After all, it's only fun if both parties are willing. Wei Wei Bai's face turned red again. Jiang Jiushi sighed. She was still too inexperienced. She couldn't even stand such a little dirty talk. He really didn't know where she got this from. Jiang Jiushi controlled the pace of the negotiation. He knocked on the contract again. So I agree not to force you, but the time limit will be changed from 3 months to 3 years. Wei Wei Bai couldn't help but exclaim, 3 years? For a girl, 3 years of her youth was all spent on the path of being a mistress. It was very likely that her whole life would be ruined. Jiang Jiushi looked up slightly. Then everything will be as usual. Wei Wei Bai looked at him silently. Her clear and cute eyes were no longer as optimistic and naive as before. Instead, it was the embarrassment and pain of betrayal. Jiang Jiushi looked at her and then looked away, ignoring the throbbing in his heart. Then he lowered his head and drank his tea indifferently, as if he didn't feel anything about her sadness. After taking a sip of tea, he seemed to have casually picked up a document bag. The photos in the bag slipped out. Wei Wei Bai saw something and immediately snatched it. It was a pitiful photo of the Bai couple. The two middle-aged men no longer looked glamorous. Instead, they were shabby and desolate on streets. Wei Wei Bai's body trembled as she looked at the photos one by one in disbelief. Dad, Mom? Jiang Jiushi said calmly. It seems that your parents aren't doing well. If the Bai family's company goes bankrupt, they won't be able to return to China. Because as soon as they return to the country, they will go to jail because of tax issues. If they didn't return to their country, they would have a miserable life. Wei Wei Bai held the photo and smiled sadly. Suddenly, she picked up the pen, and her slender fingers trembled violently. When he signed his name was distorted. Jiang Jiushi was not picky. Instead, he reminded him, take a look at the terms and conditions of the contract. I've added a few more. Wei Wei Bai's face was filled with grief and indignation. There's no need. I can't resist anyway. She was angry and fierce and pitiful. For a moment, Jiang Jiushi couldn't argue with her, because it was rare to see such a rich and cute expression on her face. Jiang Jiushi took the signed contract and filled in what Wei Wei Bai said. I won't take advantage of you. I said that you won't force me, so you won't force me. After all, this was not a long-term solution. Jiang Jiushi felt that he had self-control and played the game slowly. Wei Wei Bai's expression didn't look much better. She saw Jiang Jiushi put away the contract. She couldn't help but say, my parents, Jiang Jiushi smiled. I'll send someone to take care of your parents. As long as you stay here obediently for 3 years, I promise that your parents will be able to return to China after 3 years. 3 years was such a long time. The download address is at https://www.sashu.com. Chapter 2022. Who knew if he could keep it fresh for that long? If he stopped liking Wei Wei Bai in advance, it was not impossible for him to let her go free. Jiang Jiushi felt that he was very principled when it came to business. Wei Wei Bai seemed to heave a sigh of relief. Then, she staggered a few steps and almost sat on the floor. Jiang Jiushi did not see her stumbling footsteps. After packing up the documents and photos, he finally looked up, and the dark anger in his eyes climbed up bit by bit. Okay, now that we're done talking about business, let's talk about the punishment. Jiang Jiushi's words were calm, but cold. Wei Wei Bai looked confused. What punishment, Jiang Jiushi? In the contract just now, although there are more rules that I can't force you to touch me, there are also more rules that if you run away in the future, you will be punished for disobeying me. Wei Wei Bai seemed to have thought that she did not have to sell her body, so she was not so afraid. She even looked straight at him. How are you going to punish me? Are you going to hit me? Jiang Jiushi. Am I that low in her eyes? Hitting a woman? He was speechless for a few seconds. Finally, he shook his head and said softly, I won't hit you. Take off your clothes. Wei Wei Bai widened her eyes. What are you going to do? Jiang Jiushi. What can I do? I'm still lame. Are you afraid that you can't outrun me? Wei Wei Bai immediately took a few steps back and distanced herself from him. After all, she had suffered once and knew how strong his fingers were. If she was caught by him, she would not be able to escape. Jiang Jiushi crossed his hands and casually placed them on his exquisite chin. He stared at her with his dark eyes. I haven't seen you dance in a long time. You're not wearing pants and long clothes. Put on shorts and tights and dance for me. Wei Wei Bai couldn't help but retort. I can still dance very well like this. Jiang Jiushi sneered. The punishment is that I won't accept any rebuttal. If you don't listen to me, I'll strip you naked. Wei Wei Bai gritted her teeth and looked at him. She seemed to want to struggle and resist, but in the end, she thought of something and went limp. Then she ran back to her room to change. Jiang Jiushi saw her running away. For a moment, he wanted to chase after her. After all, she had already run away once. He did not trust her. This was an instinctive reaction, but as soon as this thought surfaced, he laughed at himself. Was he really serious? He was so afraid that she would run away. It was just that it was rare to find someone who was pleasing to the eye. It wasn't like that person was unique. Jiang Jiushi calmed down and waited. However, he saw Wei Wei Bai dawdling as she came out in a sports suit with shorts and short sleeves. In this state, her eyes were bright and her face was flushed. Her face was full of collagen and she was wearing this sportswear. It was a perfect interpretation of what it meant to be invincible in youth. Seeing Wei Wei Bai like this, Jiang Jiushi felt that he was dead for a moment. She was like a light, the center of attention wherever she stood. She was born to be on the stage. Wei Wei Bai stood a little further away from him. She stood in the living room with her hands on her hips and frowned as she said, "What kind of dance are you going to watch me do?" Jiang Jiushi thought, erotic dance or pole dance? Of course, he couldn't say this. Being forced to this point today was already Wei Wei Bai's limit. If he let this sheltered little princess dance these dances, she probably couldn't stand it and would run away from home again. So Jiang Jiushi's voice was a little hoarse as he said softly, "I don't know much about dancing. Just do whatever you want." Wei Wei Bai stood there awkwardly for a few seconds before she gently tiptoed. Her slender and beautiful legs were raised, and her soft waist was bent back like a green willow tree. A dance move full of tension appeared. Her movements were light, clean, and elegant. There was no sloppiness in the dance moves. Every step was perfect and full of nimbleness. There was no music, but one could see the rhythm flowing from her toes. At first, Jiang Jiushi stared at Wei Wei Bai's white legs. But gradually, his eyes froze on her expression that was beginning to become serious. Dancing was her favorite career, so her unwillingness at the beginning had been replaced by a serious attitude. She seemed to have forgotten about him. A thin layer of sweat appeared on her forehead, but her eyes were focused and filled with passion. This was a kind of feeling that Jiang Jiushi had never had before. It was a kind of devout feeling for something one loved. It was full of appeal. Jiang Jiushi's eyes softened, and the rhythm of his heart also sped up with her steps. Jiang Jiushi finally realized. She was very beautiful. She was different from anyone else's beauty. Ding! The male lead's favorability has increased to 40. T. Chapter 2023. After Wei Wei Bai finished her dance, the thin layer of sweat on her forehead had long disappeared, but her face was abnormally red. Her eyes were misty and filled with grievance, as if she had been bullied badly. Her eyebrows and eyes were weak and thin. Her voice was a little hoarse from exhaustion. "Is it okay now?" Jiang Jiushi's eyelashes lowered slightly, suppressing the shock and inexplicable emotions in his eyes. He said lightly, "It won't be so easy in the future. You have to fulfill your responsibilities after signing the contract, understand?" Wei Wei Bai curled her lips. Her smile was a little cold, but she still looked soft when she was so angry. "Got it, Mr. Jiang. Mr. Jiang," even if it was called out in that sweet and soft voice of hers. Jiang Jiushi didn't like it either. Too polite. Jiang Jiushi realized that he had a little too many expectations of Wei Wei Bai. He actually hoped that she would act coquettishly or something like that, and not be so cold and hard. But thinking about how so many things had happened today, Wei Wei might have been pushed to the limit. With her soft personality, she couldn't wait to perish together with him. When Jiang Jiushi thought of this, he couldn't help but imagine her dying with him. If he gave her a knife, she might not even be able to stab him in the chest. After all, she had a soft personality and a soft heart. Jiang Jiushi couldn't help but curl his lips and suppress his amused smile. He felt that there was something wrong with him, imagining Wei Wei by killing him. He felt that that scene was quite cute. Jiang Jiushi sighed. Was his mood a little off recently? He was just about to adjust his state and return to his usual cold and indifferent state. But he found that Wei Wei Bai's footsteps were a little weak, and she staggered. Then she quickly stood still, but her ankles were very tight. It seemed that to her, standing in this position had already consumed a lot of her energy. He couldn't help but frown. His gaze fell on her feet, legs, and finally to her face. Her skin was very fair and clean. The light pink was very obvious on her skin. Her skin was actually red, a thin layer of red. Jiang Jiushi felt that something was wrong. Wei Wei Bai was already in a trance, but she still stood straight. The dancer had a good figure and didn't have the bad habit of slouching. Her almond-shaped eyes were already half closed, and she looked like she was about to collapse at any moment. Jiang Jiushi's fingers trembled, and he immediately pushed his wheelchair over. As a result, Bai Weiwei seemed to be frightened. Her whole body staggered back a few steps. Suddenly, she felt dizzy and couldn't stand. She blacked out and fell backwards. Wobby fell hard. His brain was in contact with the floor. Even a concussion was possible. Jiang Jiushi's mind went blank for a moment. By the time he came back to his senses, he had already stood up from his wheelchair. Because he used too much force, the entire wheelchair was flipped over, and all the strength in his body exploded. He threw his entire body forward and grabbed her waist in midair. Then the two of them rolled into a ball. The huge impact made his mind go blank. He couldn't remember it all. They were so far away just now. How did he drag his crippled leg and use the strength of his body to fly over? Even if he worked out all year round, it was almost impossible for him to do such a move. Chapter 2024. Wei Wei Bai's head was instinctively pressed against his chest, and her hair scattered all over his body. He hugged her tightly, and his body fell heavily to the floor due to inertia. A piercing pain came from his arm, and his bones took too much of the impact. Jiang Jiushi took a deep breath, but his attention was quickly captured by Wei Wei Bai's state. He hugged her as if he was hugging a big stove. It was boiling hot. He didn't know how long it had been burning. Jiang Jiushi belatedly remembered when he entered the door just now. Her complexion had already started to look strange. Her cheeks had a light pink like natural rouge, but that light pink was very natural. It wasn't like now, so red that it made his heart tremble. Jiang Jiushi hugged her and wanted to get up, but he found that his feet had fallen to the ground, and he felt even more helpless and in pain. He reached out and hammered the ground fiercely, his eyes fierce and irritable. Then he took out his phone from his pocket and called Luan Shan. He knew that Luan Shan couldn't have gone far. The call went through quickly. Luan Shan hurriedly opened the door and rushed in as soon as he heard that. Luan Shan didn't dare to go far. He was afraid that Jiang Jiushi would torment Wei Wei Bai and cause problems, so he could deal with the aftermath. Moreover, Jiang Jiushi's leg was a problem, so he always had to have someone by his side. Luan Shan was not at ease at all. After putting the angry Jiang Jiushi and the pitiful Wei Wei Bai together, he immediately left. Luan Shan was also shocked when he saw this scene. Did he torture someone to death? Jiang Jiushi saw that he was still staring at Wei Wei Bai. He frowned and said in an irritable tone, "Come and help." Luan Shan immediately rushed over. He wanted to help Jiang Jiushi stand up and put him in the wheelchair. However, Jiang Jiushi said coldly, "Carry her first and bring me the crutches of the wheelchair." The crutch was specially made. It was relatively small and folded into several sections. It was placed in the bag behind the wheelchair. Luan Shan immediately nodded and carefully picked up Wei Wei Bai. He was also shocked by the temperature of Wei Wei Bai's body. This high fever seemed to have been burning for a long time. The girl in Jiang Joshi's arms was taken away by another man. He couldn't help but want to reach out and snatch her back. This kind of instinctive action was like sleepwalking. Jiang Joshi was in a daze for a moment. Then he stretched out his fingers and clenched them in the air. He took it back. His eyes were incomparably dark as he propped himself up from the floor and stared fiercely at his crippled foot. With the help of Luan Shan, the group of people rushed to the hospital. Wei Wei Bai's fever had reached a maximum of 40 degrees Celsius. Physical cooling, fever reduction injections, and so on were all given to her. But this time, the high fever came too violently. It was not easy for the fever to subside, but it started again. The doctor said that the infection was not treated in time, and the patient's huge psychological stress caused the high fever. Jiang Joshi looked at her until she was confused by the fever. She kept calling out for her parents. She cried pitifully and miserably. She was still a child. When her body was hit, it couldn't take it and immediately collapsed. Jiang Joshi stayed by the bed all night to cool her down physically. He listened to her unconscious murmuring of grievances. Like a little girl, she complained about his bad habits in a mess. Then, she jumped back to the basics of dancing. In the end, she still called out for her parents. Her face was red from the fever, the corners of her eyes were red, and her fingers were soft and hot. He reached out and held her hand. It was soft and hot, but he couldn't feel the sweat. She probably had a fever before she danced. But at that time, the fever was not as fierce as it was now. But later on, after he entered the sect, a series of threats and bribes were added to the punishment. Her low fever suddenly erupted into a terrifying high fever. To read at https://www. Sashu. Com to read on your phone. https://m. Sashu. Com to facilitate your next reading. You can click on the Chapter 2025. Infection was also an infection of the wound. He admitted that he did not apply the medicine in time. He also forced her to a dead end. That was why she fell down. If not for him, she would still be a cute little princess. Her parents would dote on her, and she would be her dancer. There would be no worries in life, no destruction. When Jiang Joshi thought about it, he realized that in Wei Wei Bai's heart, he was like a demon. His hand held her fingers and did not let go. In the morning, he finally broke out in a sweat. Her fever began to subside. Jiang Joshi did not sleep the whole night. His eyes were bloodshot, and a light green stubble appeared on his chin. He, who was neat and energetic overnight, looked haggard and a little depressed. Wei Wei Bai opened her eyes in a daze. She looked at him and did not seem to recognize him. She even smiled foolishly. She was really stupid from the fever. Jiang Joshi could not help but smile helplessly. He did not want to say anything to comfort her. Her eyelashes fluttered, and she closed her eyes and fell asleep. Jiang Joshi's smile stiffened. After a long time, he returned to his expressionless face and sighed tiredly. He began to reflect. Was his methods too tough? In the past, he was either facing colleagues, assistants, or enemies. His attitude was not polite, and his orders were to destroy. When had he ever acted like this in front of such a soft girl? He worried every day if his methods were too cruel. He forced her to death. But if he did not force her, he did not know how to make her listen. When Luan Shan came in with breakfast and Wei Wei Bai's change of clothes, he entered the ward and saw Jiang Joshi's gloomy and haggard face. He kept looking at Wei Wei Bai, and his eyes did not move away at all. Luan Shan's mouth twitched. He felt that his boss was probably in trouble. How could this be the attitude of keeping a lover? Wei Wei Bai complained to the system. Didn't you say that the fever was just an act? I feel like I'm going to lose my mind. The system said, that's the only effect you can get when you're born with a life value. If you want to burn it, then so be it. It's already good enough that you're still conscious at this point. When Wei Wei Bai was dancing, she knew that she had a low fever. However, it was impossible for him to develop a high fever. His body was very strong. Therefore, she asked the system to buy a little cheat to increase the temperature of her fever. In the end, Wei Wei Bai really felt that she had become stupid from the fever. If he hadn't kept a clear head, he would have been calling out for his parents the entire night. It's that I, a scumbag, want you to repay my love. Give me 100 favorable impression points. My ultimate goal is to make everyone kneel and lick my beauty. If Jiang Jiushi heard this, the image of a little princess collapsed into a teddy bear that was running wildly on the prairie. No matter what, he couldn't get back on track. Wei Wei Bai had a fever the whole night, and the little cheat finally lost its effect. Her whole body was aching, in addition to the dancing and the after effects of the high fever. Her bones felt like they had been run over by a heavy truck. Wei Wei Bai opened her eyes. When she wanted to get up, she couldn't help but frown when she tried to get up. She couldn't get up at all. Jiang Jiushi was opening the food box with his head down. It was white rice porridge that had been cooked for a long time. It was thick and sticky. It melted in his mouth. When he heard movement, he immediately looked up and saw Wei Wei Bai staring at him blankly with a pair of tired and bloodshot eyes. The redness at the corner of her eyes made her look pitiful. Seeing this, Jiang Jiushi's heart softened. // Chapter 2026. He didn't know that a cold person like himself would find a girl like Wei Wei Bai cute. When he first saw her on stage, she wasn't beautiful or elegant. She was soft. There wasn't a trace of firmness in her waist. It had all turned into water. She was wearing a gauze dress, and her legs and waist were thin. When she smiled, her eyes were filled with pure stars. She was so soft that she was cute. This dance had shattered all the coldness and viciousness in his heart towards her, as well as his malicious desire for revenge. There was only one thought in his mind. He wanted to hug her. This was a man's most primitive desire for a woman. He was used to making decisions for himself, and he didn't have any respect for her. He directly used coercion to snatch her into his hands. Wei Wei Bai looked at him, pursed her pale lips, and turned around with difficulty, not intending to look at him. Jiang Jiushi wasn't angry, and he couldn't get angry. His voice was incomparably gentle. Wei Wei, eat something. Your fever has just subsided, and you need nutrition. Her spleen and stomach were weak now, and she couldn't eat oil immediately. She could only eat some porridge to wake up her stomach. Wei Wei Bai seemed to want to be willful, but she thought of something, and her shoulders stiffened. She slowly turned around. Jiang Jiushi raised the bed and set up a small dining table for her. She still didn't look at him, but she didn't resist either. Instead, she ate the porridge very slowly. That snail speed made Jiang Jiushi want to feed her. But when he thought about how he couldn't please her here, if he fed her, she wouldn't dare to resist even if she was unhappy, and her mood would be worse. It wouldn't be good for her condition at all. Jiang Jiushi's dark and deep eyes fell on her without moving. Wei Wei Bai drank less than half a bowl, and she couldn't drink anymore. Her face was pale, and she frowned and wanted to give up. But she heard Jiang Jiushi say lightly, "If you don't eat more, you won't be able to get better. With your body like this, I won't let you go out to dance." Wei Wei Bai looked as if she had heard something scary, and she looked at him with a pale face. The spoon in his hand also fell into the bowl with a clang. When Jiang Jiushi saw that she was frightened, he immediately knew that she had misunderstood his words. She thought that he wouldn't let her go out. What happened last night scared her so much that she shrank back in her shell. Not to mention smiling at him. She wouldn't even look at him. Jiang Jiushi pursed his lips, feeling a little bitter. It was clearly developing in the direction he wanted, but why was he so afraid when he saw her? He didn't feel happy at all. Wei Wei Bai didn't say anything else. Instead, she picked up the spoon with trembling fingers and continued to drink the porridge. He looked like he was having a hard time drinking. Jiang Jiushi's eyes fell on her delicate frown. He suddenly rubbed his face as a trace of annoyance welled up in his heart. Then he reached out, grabbed her wrist, and made her put down the spoon. "If you don't want to eat, you can reject me directly. Don't be afraid of me." His voice was low, suppressing the coldness of his bad temper. But there was also a hint of gentleness that was hard to detect. Wei Wei Bai lowered her eyes, pursed her lips, and didn't say anything. Her fingers were still trembling slightly. Jiang Jiushi pursed his thin lips, which were a little sharp. In the end, The tense expression on his face softened. His voice was so low that it was almost inaudible. I went overboard. Don't be afraid. It was almost like a surrender. After Jiang Jiushi said it, he wondered how he could say such words. He frowned and let go of her wrist. Don't eat if you don't want to. Throw it away. He then pushed the wheelchair, intending to go out to calm down. Before he could go out, he heard Wei Wei Bai ask softly, "Were you by my side last night?" Jiang Jiushi wanted to go out directly, but his eyes lit up. He didn't want to do a good deed without leaving his name. He deliberately said in a hoarse voice, "I stayed up all night to change her ice pack and drip." He even wiped her body. He didn't say that out loud. The girl behind him was silent for a while before saying softly, "Thank you." He was the one who forced her to this point. She was still so polite. This kind of personality was destined to be at a disadvantage. Jiang Jiushi had the urge to ask her to give him a kiss as a thank you gift, but he suppressed such a shameless action. He slowly pushed the wheelchair out, but he couldn't help but smile softly. Ding! The male lead's favorability is at 45. To make it easier for you to read it next time, you can click the button. Chapter 2027. Wei Wei Bai stayed in the hospital for a whole day. The next day, she was brought back to his house by Jiang Jiushi. You'll live here in the future. Jiang Jiushi was like a dictator. When he said this, he was sitting in his wheelchair. The sunlight by the window fell on his eyebrows. He actually showed some gentleness. But Wei Wei Bai didn't look at him. She seemed to be very tired and fell asleep as soon as she closed her eyes. Jiang Jiushi didn't say anything. He sat quietly at the side. After a long time, he went out to order dinner. When she was willful, he didn't feel angry. In fact, he was very patient. After such a torment, Wei Wei Bai would consider the consequences of running away in the future. Wei Wei Bai's body was more or less recovered after a few days. When she was sick, Jiang Jiushi was very gentle. There was no trace of the ferocious look he showed last time. Unfortunately, she still looked at him as if she was looking at a tiger. Sometimes, Jiang Jiushi couldn't help but laugh at himself. Which little lover was so hard to please and so cold? If it was someone else, how could they tolerate her like this? However, Jiang Jiushi felt that this was normal for her. After all, if she learned to please him immediately, he would think that she had ulterior motives. Wei Wei Bai refused to come out for dinner. Jiang Jiushi faced the dining table alone and waited for the nanny to come out. The nanny came out with a tray. The food on the table had been touched. It was Wei Wei Bai's appetite. The nanny said, "Miss ate some. I'll bring the medicine in later." Then she saw that the food on the table was untouched. She couldn't help but ask in surprise, "Sir?" Jiang Jiushi raised his eyes slightly. His eyes were cold. The nanny didn't dare to say anything. Jiang Jiushi said, "She's better. Go and get some fresh fruit. Cut it nicely and bring it in." The nanny immediately nodded and went to the kitchen to cut some fruits. Jiang Jiushi breathed a sigh of relief. He was not afraid that Wei Wei Bai would not come out, but he was afraid that she would not eat. Then he picked up his chopsticks and slowly began to eat the cold food. He knew that something was wrong with him, and he had a bad premonition. It was as if there was a different emotion that was suppressed in the depths of his heart. He wanted to poke his head out. Jiang Jiushi suppressed it and didn't think too much about it. Or rather, he didn't dare to think too much about it. Wei Wei Bai finished her meal and took out her phone to play games. When he heard the sound, he immediately hid his phone and hugged his pillow, looking haggard and pale. The nanny came in with some fruits and placed them on the small table. She smiled and said, "Miss, sir asked me to bring some fruits in." Wei Wei Bai seemed to tremble when she heard the word sir. She was afraid of Jiang Jiushi. The nanny couldn't help but sigh in her heart. What a sin, such a young child. Then she went out. Jiang Jiushi was still eating. When he saw her come out, he asked, "Does she like fruits?" The nanny didn't dare to lie. "Miss still doesn't look well, and she's a little nervous." Jiang Jiushi's chopsticks paused. Nervous? What? She should be afraid of him. He didn't expect her to be so weak in the face of threats. If it were anyone else, they would be despised and laughed at by him. He didn't like such a weak personality at all. Jiang Jioshi's face was tense for a long time before he put down his chopsticks. He had spent too much energy on her during this period of time. Jiang Jioshi felt that something was wrong with him. His mind was filled with thoughts of what was going on with her every day. He had always been self-disciplined. How could such a strange thing happen? Just as Jiang Jioshi was feeling conflicted, the download address is at https://www.sashu.com say button. Chapter 2028. Wei Wei Bai was eating fruits and playing games, except that her face was pale. She looked relaxed. The system had just handed in the knitted sweater and received 3 days of life points. Then it took over the embroidery. It was embroidering. Then it remembered that it was still a system and had to care about its host. Now that you've pushed the male lead out of the door, the favorability is not increasing. The male lead is so angry that he doesn't even eat. Wei Wei Bai, serves him right. Starve this bastard to death. It's best if he starves until his stomach ulcers. I'll let him torment me. That beastly night still made her teeth itch when she thought about it. It hurt. Wei Wei Bai laughed eerily as she played games. I think he's just a newbie in love. Too many tricks will get in the way. Anyway, there's still a lot of time. Let's exhaust his energy first. Jiang Jioshi was inexperienced in love, but he was still smart. 45 favorability was enough to accumulate the initial favorability. He definitely had feelings for her. After 50, he would enter into deep feelings of love and then slowly move towards true love. And at 91 and 100, it was basically life and death. Wei Wei Bai had experienced so many worlds that she already had her own way of calculating favorability. This was especially true for a few lifetimes planes, which made her realize how important a favorability of 100 points was. If it was only about feelings and feelings, 45 was definitely enough. And Jiang Jioshi was a person with a heavy mind. Being too proactive would make him wary. If the traces of a strategy were too obvious, even a fool could fool him. With Jiang Jioshi's IQ, it was not easy to fool him. Sometimes it was better not to use the strategy and let Jiang Jioshi calm down. Wei Wei Bai thought about Jiang Jioshi's personality and the strategy and realized that she did not need to be too proactive. So she took a break and finished playing games before thinking about the strategy. And the system was already embroidering seriously. One person and one system, both seriously doing things that digress from the topic. He worked very seriously and was very happy. Jiang Jioshi finished an uncomfortable dinner and sat in the living room, analyzing his own problems with a cold face. She thought about her encounter with Wei Wei Bai and their interactions. Apart from realizing that he was a villain, the more he thought about it, the more confused he became. He hated this kind of disorderly chaos. This meant that something was out of his control and out of his control. Jiang Jioshi glanced at Wei Wei Bai's door for quite a while. When a nanny came to clean up the table, he suddenly woke up. Stupid things like staring at the door had been happening a lot lately. In the past, he could just push open the door and do whatever he wanted. Why would he hesitate? If he hesitated about everything, how could a cripple like him survive to this point? Jiang Jioshi's face showed traces of gloomy hostility. He suddenly called Luan Shan. Pick me up later. Let's go to Jinhua Villa. Brocade Garden sounded nice, but it was actually a members-only bar. Its specialty was that it was a high-class social butterfly. To get rid of Wei Wei Bai's shadow in his mind, he thought about it and finally chose to call a high-class social butterfly. When the car arrived, Jiang Jioshi went out. Luan Shan calmly pushed him into the car. Jiang Jioshi's face was cold. Those who didn't know better would think that he was going to kill someone, not do something. Luan Shan drove and saw that he looked like he was being abused. He couldn't help but remind him, Wei Wei, are you okay? Is your illness better? After all, Luan Shan also saw that Jiang Jioshi's feelings were not right. He was afraid that he would impulsively go to another woman and regret it when he woke up tomorrow. The S/the full articles, the downloads, the S for the convenience of your next reading. You can click on the button below to record this reading record. Chapter 2029. The one tormenting was him, the assistant. Jiang Jiushi was smoking. When he heard Wei Wei Bai's name, he looked up at Wan Shan. Amidst the thin mist, his incomparably black eyes carried a translucent coldness. Why are you calling her so intimately? Wan Shan was speechless. So that's what Big Boss is talking about. Jiang Jiushi rarely smoked and didn't like smoking. But when he was extremely frustrated, smoking could distract him. He suddenly muttered to himself, I have to figure out how much I indulge her. Wan Shan was speechless. Damn it, like means like. So what if I admit it? Does he have a phobia of first love? Why would he hire a high-class social butterfly to test if he's really attracted to another woman? Isn't this a scumbag? Wan Shan didn't dare to curse out loud. He could only silently despise his boss in his heart. Jiang Jiushi came to the city's most exclusive and confidential bar. The drinks were high class, the environment was quiet, and the women were clean. Jiang Jiushi had drunk a lot of wine. He held the wine glass and gently swirled the wine. This drink was called Little Swan. It was a mixed cocktail. The drink was so clear that it was transparent. Jiang Jiushi didn't know why he ordered it when he saw it. The alcohol content was very high. He only realized after drinking a few glasses. Wasn't Wei Wei by a Little Swan? Long legs, thin waist, elegant and beautiful neck. Even the way she walked was like a proud little swan. Jiang Jiushi thought of Wei Wei Bai, and his face darkened. The social butterfly beside him was already smiling so hard that her face was stiff. She had used all kinds of tricks. Her mouth was dry from talking, and her lipstick was about to fall off. It was fine if Jiang Jiushi was indifferent, but his expression was too ugly. Those who didn't know better would think that Jiang Jiushi was here to cause trouble. Jiang Jiushi looked at the time and said calmly. The social butterfly was speechless. This was the first time he had met someone so direct. Then the socialite pushed Jiang Jiushi into the room. Jiang Jiushi seemed to be in a bad mood. He lit a cigarette and looked at her coldly. Can you dance? Let's dance and see. Of course, the social butterfly knew how to dance. In their line of work, they knew all sorts of ways to please people. She began at once to dance gallantly and seductively. That figure, that flirtatious expression, it was so seductive. However, Jiang Jiushi looked at him like he was looking at a piece of dead meat. Your waist is as stiff as marble, and why are your legs so thick? You're dancing like you're having epilepsy. What a disgrace. The social butterfly almost broke her waist. This was the first time she wanted to strangle a guest to death. Of course, she still smiled and said, Brother Jiang, you're really... Her words were so sweet that the man felt numb. Jiang Jiushi was indifferent. Don't call me that. It's disgusting. The social butterfly was speechless. She had better get to the point quickly, or else she would go crazy. Mr. Jiang, without waiting for her to finish speaking, without even waiting for her to land on his lap, Jiang Jiushi suddenly pulled out the simple crutches beside his wheelchair and pulled her away. Pulled away, the social butterfly was stunned by the pain. The disgust between Jiang Jiushi's brows was extremely obvious. His calm and indifferent face finally showed obvious anger. He seemed anxious and a little nervous. Get lost, he said coldly. The social butterfly did not dare to stay any longer. She rolled and crawled away. She was afraid that if she was too slow, she would be killed by Jiang Jiushi. This kind of guest was scarier than a pervert. When the Wan Shan returned, she was trembling with fear. Jiang Jiushi, who was sitting in the back seat, had an ugly expression on his face. It was worse than the company going bankrupt. Chapter 2030. The company went bankrupt. Jiang Jiushi definitely didn't look like this. He should be excited, because there was another challenge. But less than 2 minutes of socializing with him, Jiang Jiushi was like this after he came out. Wan Shan smelled the smoke and couldn't help but twitch his mouth. He didn't dare to say anything. Jiang Jiushi, on the other hand, smoked gloomily. His eyes were terrifyingly dark, his eyebrows and eyes in the smoke. There was a sharp sense of delicacy. They came to the door of Jiang Jiushi's house. Wan Shan would push his wheelchair next time. Wan Shan looked at the back seat. There were cigarette butts everywhere. How irritated was he to be like this? He opened the door. The lights were on in the clean and tidy house. It was already 3 o'clock in the morning. Wei Wei Bai should be asleep. Jiang Jiushi said coldly. You go back first. I'll do the rest myself. Wan Sha nodded. He knew that he could take care of himself. Moreover, Jiang Jiushi's condition was not right. He might need to deal with it by himself. As a special assistant, Wan Shan knew Jiang Jiushi's needs like the back of his hand. After Wan Shan left, the door closed. The house was empty. Jiang Jiushi sat in silence for a while. Finally, he took out his crutches and struggled to get up. He wanted to take a shower first. After that, he casually put on a bathrobe and struggled to come out. When he walked to Wei Wei Bai's door, he stood for a while with a gloomy expression. No one knew what he was thinking. Then, he walked away silently. These 2 days, he didn't contact the doctor and asked him to massage his feet. If he didn't have a massage for a day, his muscles wouldn't immediately shrink. But Jiang Jiushi didn't know why he was so uncomfortable. He would go for a second checkup on his legs. If everything went well, the first surgery could be performed at the end of the month. The surgery was divided into 2 parts. At the latest, he would be able to stand up in the second half of the year. Jiang Jiushi didn't know why he was so eager to stand up. In the past, the first thing that came to his mind when he was insulted the most was always revenge. Instead of feeling sorry for himself and complaining about why his leg was broken. However, recently, the thought of performing surgery kept flashing through his mind. It seemed to have been after he met her. Every time she danced, he looked at her beautiful legs. Then, a different kind of emotion would appear in his mind. Jiang Jiushi took out the medicinal powder used to soak his feet and began to make himself a foot-soaking potion. The potion smelled terrible. There was a strong, bitter taste. Jiang Jiushi sat on a special chair in the bathroom and put his foot into the solution. Then he bent down and massaged his muscles bit by bit. Some of the acupuncture points, such as the ones on the soles of the feet, were very low. The strength of his massage was not suitable. He ended up in a sorry state. The massage would take about an hour, and the position of the massage had to be precise. This was a test of stamina and concentration. Jiang Jiushi massaged his stump. His fingers paused on the twisted leg for a while before he continued to massage. It was a faint feeling of uncertainty. It was like a sense of inferiority. It was a feeling of inferiority that he refused to admit after he became disabled. He even replaced it with a cruel and rational mentality of revenge. He never felt inferior. No, it should be said that even if he felt inferior, he hid it very well. It was so deep that he could even lie to himself. He never cared whether he was disabled or not. Perhaps it was because he drank too much and it was very late at night. Alone, he bent over and tried his best to perform a simple massage. Jiang Jiushi finally admitted that every time he saw her on tiptoe, that extremely beautiful lightness, it was a feeling of inferiority. Then a sense of possessiveness surged in. The / you can see it when you open the bookshelf next time. If you like that. Chapter 2031. His possessiveness was so rampant that it covered up his almost non-existent sense of inferiority. Jiang Jiushi's lips twitched. He had not expected himself to fall to such a state. He even had feelings of inferiority. He could not help but curse himself softly. Damn it, what a piece of trash. She was just a woman, and he was actually worried about losing her. As soon as he cursed softly, the sound of someone kicking a trash can could be heard from outside the bathroom. Jiang Jiushi's eyes sharpened. He immediately looked up and saw Wei Wei Bai standing outside the bathroom door. He was too lazy to open the bathroom door, so when she passed by, she happened to see him bending over and reaching out to touch the soles of his feet. Because he was too focused, a large part of his bathrobe fell apart, revealing the faint lines of his muscular chest. The muscles on his arms were also very tense. Wei Wei Bai was wearing conservative pajamas. Her neck was too thin, and the round-collar pajamas revealed some space. She looked cute and thin. She seemed a little surprised as she looked at him with watery eyes under the light. Jiang Jiushi stiffened for a while before slowly getting up. He was a little embarrassed, but he hid it well. Can't sleep. After all, she had slept for so long with a high fever. Wei Bai pursed her pink lips and shook her head. Then she hesitated before saying, I'll get up and drink some water. Jiang Jiushi smiled. There's some dried flowers in the kitchen fridge. You can make a cup of rose tea. He heard that girls like strawberries, flower tea, and all sorts of other things that looked exquisite but were not important. He had already gotten someone to prepare them. Wei Bai was a little nervous. She pinched the corner of her pajamas and hesitantly took a few steps back. But in the end, she still slowly walked into the bathroom and asked softly, Do you need help? She still could not bear to. No matter how hateful he was still a disabled person. Jiang Jiushi saw the naked sympathy in her eyes. Of course, he also saw the message in her eyes. Jiang Jiushi's breathing seemed to become a little erratic. Then he lowered his eyelids, his thick eyelashes covering his eyes. No need, you can go. The half-drunk man had forgotten all about pretending to be pitiful and scheming. The feeling of inferiority made him feel a little embarrassed. He just wanted to get through it quickly. Tomorrow, he would still be that powerful and cruel Jiang Jiushi. Wei Bai stood there in a daze for a few seconds before she reacted and said, Oh. Then she turned around and left. Jiang Jiushi. After she left, he was not in the mood to continue the massage and took the leg out of the bucket. Then he wiped his feet with a towel. After wiping his feet, he struggled to put on his slippers. Just as he reached for his walking stick and was about to stand up, he saw Wei Bai turn back. She lowered her head and walked in without a word. Then, she poured out the medicine that he had used to soak his feet. Then, without saying a word, she reached out to hold his empty arm. Her hand was soft, but also tight with a reassuring strength. I'll help you back. Jiang Jiushi's body stiffened. After a while, he allowed her to help him back to the room. Then he sat on the bed. When Wei Bai saw that he was finally back on the bed, her pale face relaxed and relieved. Then she said, I'm going to sleep. She turned around and was about to run away. Jiang Jiushi suddenly said behind her, Aren't you going to say good night? Wei Bai was stunned for a moment before she said perfunctorily, Good night. Jiang Jiushi said lightly, Only a good night kiss is qualified. Wei Bai pursed her lips and trembled. Suddenly, she turned around and rushed in front of him. She lowered her head and kissed his forehead. Good night, she murmured softly. Then, like a frightened swallow, she flew out of the room, afraid that he would do something bad. Jiang Jiushi could not help but curl her lips into a smile. As he laughed, he frowned as if something was wrong. After a long time, he finally admitted it. He seemed to be a bit moved. Ding, the male lead's favorability has increased to 50. Transmigration system. Male god, come here. Transmigration system. Male god, come here. /transmigration system. Male god, come here. Transmigration system. Male god, come here. / to make it easier for you to read it next time, you can click the button. You can see it next time you open the bookshelf. If you like transmigration system, male god, come here. Chapter 2032. What happened last night made Jiang Jiushi unable to calm down for a long time. The next day at breakfast, there were some dark shadows under his eyes. Although he was clean-shaven, his clothes were neat and handsome. The tiredness between his eyebrows was obvious. Wei Bai didn't seem to notice his expression as she ate breakfast with a bitter face. She ate very quickly as if someone was chasing her. Jiang Jiushi thought that his eating speed was above average. He hadn't eaten half of his breakfast yet. Wei Bai had already put down her chopsticks. She lowered her head and said hurriedly, Then I'll leave first. Enjoy your meal. Jiang Jiushi's chopsticks paused. His eyes were cold and oppressive. Wei Bai had already gotten up. She didn't have the ability to observe his body language at all. Jiang Jiushi put down his chopsticks indifferently. With a hint of coercion, he said, Wait, come back. The girl who was called stopped in her tracks. There was a hint of unwillingness on her face. She pursed her lips and looked back at him with a hint of nervousness in her eyes. Jiang Jiushi took out a handkerchief and wiped his mouth. Bend over. Wei Bai looked at him blankly. She didn't know what to do and could only bend over. In the end, he suddenly reached out and pulled her into his arms. Wei Bai sat on his lap. Wei Wei Bai was shocked and wanted to get up, but his hands were firmly gripping her waist. Jiang Jiushi smelled the fresh, light fragrance on the girl's body. It was like shower gel, but it wasn't. After all, the two of them used the same brand of shampoo and shower gel. His body didn't smell like this either. Wei Wei Bai sat stiffly in his arms. She looked pitiful, as if she wanted to break free from his arms and escape. Jiang Jiushi quietly sniffed the hair beside her ear. His eyes softened. Is there any problem with the dance troupe? Wei Wei Bai stiffened her neck and shook her head after a long time. Jiang Jiushi asked indifferently, "Does that require investment? I'll get you the role of the female lead." There was a main character in a dance play. This time, Wei Wei Bai had applied for the job and not invested through the back door. Therefore, the role he got was a more important supporting role. But a supporting role was still a supporting role. In the future, even if the drama was successful, the attention and glory would be given to the main character. Wei Wei Bai reacted faster this time and immediately shook her head desperately. "No need. I've been rehearsing for a long time. I can't be the main character even if you want me to." Jiang Jiushi's tone became a little gloomier. "There's nothing that can't be done. You're so good. Who can compare to you?" He had seen so many performances of the dance troupe. Even though she wasn't very interested in this kind of thing, she crammed on the basics of dance. It was about time to see who was better at dancing. Wei Wei Bai's talent was visible to the naked eye. She was born to stand in the center of the stage. Who dared to say that she couldn't jump? Could it be that someone in the dance troupe bullied her because they knew that her family was bankrupt? Jiang Jiushi himself was sinister and deep. He didn't think that anyone was a good person. With just a casual sentence from Bai Wei Wei, he could fill in a bunch of things in his mind. Wei Wei Bai trembled. She felt that he was a little unreasonable. The dance play is going to start next month. We've been rehearsing for so long. Everyone has their own position. If one person suddenly changes, it will cause chaos. Actually, they could still change. After all, the male and female leads had backups. They were afraid that they couldn't find a replacement if something happened to the two leads. But Wei Wei Bai was lazy and didn't want to mess around with this kind of thing. Moreover, she was a little angel. Pure and kind was her nature. Is at https://www.sashu.com// Chapter 2033. Jiang Jiushi could hear the dissatisfaction in her voice. He was sure that she was not being bullied, but that she was unwilling to change. He was silent for a moment. It seemed that there was nothing that could make her happy. Wei Wei Bai sat for a while and finally frowned. "Mr. Jiang," Jiang Jiushi raised his eyebrows and said coldly, "Call me by my name." Wei Wei Bai was speechless. Jiang Jiushi said, "Jiushi." Wei Wei Bai said dryly, "Jiushi." Jiang Jiushi relaxed his brows. He finally let go of her soft waist and let her jump up as if she was on fire. She immediately grabbed her shoulder bag and rushed out of the door. Jiang Jiushi helplessly reached out his hand. The darkness in his eyes finally dissipated a little. There was more helplessness in his eyes. "Why'd you run so fast?" Jiang Jiushi called Luan Shan and asked him to take him to the hospital for a checkup. Luan Shan soon arrived. After a series of examinations at the hospital, he waited for the results to come out. Jiang Jiushi held his phone and looked at it with a heavy expression. Luan Shan felt that something was wrong with his condition. His eyes were so excited that they were about to emit a wolfish light. This was not the time for any major challenges. Was this an expression that only Jiang Jiushi would have? Sure enough, before Luan Shan could think of any major problems recently, Jiang Jiushi's voice was low and soothing. "Luan Shan, I've decided to change my attitude towards Wei Wei." Luan Shan immediately smiled. "Do you want me to prepare a gift or buy flowers?" The boss was finally enlightened. He finally realized that he had fallen in love with a girl, and he wanted to change his attitude. It couldn't be better. A man should be nicer to the girl he liked. Otherwise, wouldn't he be a scumbag? Jiang Jiushi shook his head. "Sending flowers and gifts won't work on her. I have to put in some effort to change her attitude." He had overestimated Wei Wei Bai's tolerance. From the very beginning, she was so scared that she shrank into her turtle shell. Now, she would not open her heart to him at all. If it weren't for the fact that he still had a pair of crippled legs, he could use them to gain sympathy. She didn't even look at him. Wan Shan immediately came up with an idea. Why don't we order some jewelry or buy some good dancing shoes and costumes? Jiang Jiushi tilted his head. Traces of hostility appeared on his cold and exquisite face. You seem to care a lot about her. These words were simply murderous and heart-wrenching. Crossover system, Adonis, come here. / crossover system, Adonis, come here. / crossover system, Adonis, come here. Download crossover system, Adonis, come here. Mobile crossover system, Adonis, come here. Chapter 2034. Wan Shan's loyalty to Jiang Jiushi turned into concern for Wei Wei Bai. He immediately shut up and didn't dare to make a sound. After scaring Wan Shan into silence, Jiang Jiushi finally made a call. It was for some of the underground forces that were working with him. Yes, although it's just a small matter, I still hope that you can treat it well. Jiang Jiushi's voice was calm and steady, with a hint of condescension. 2 people will be enough. You can change shifts a few times a day. She's just a girl who hasn't seen much of the world. She won't be able to tell. Jiang Jiushi instructed bit by bit. He was afraid that he would miss something. Send me her daily routine every day. Get someone to be on standby at any time. I'll have orders in the future. Don't scare her when you're following her. She's timid. If anyone dares to bully her, hand over the information. Wan Shan couldn't help but frown when he heard these instructions. Usually, unless it was something that couldn't be settled on the surface, he wouldn't trouble those underground forces. In the end, Jiang Jiushi actually used this part of the forces, and he even gave such trivial orders. For some reason, Wan Shan felt that his boss was like a control freak when he listened to his orders. It was as if he wanted to hold Wei Wei Bai in the palm of his hand in the dark. He didn't give her any privacy. Wasn't this perverted? After Jiang Jiushi hung up the phone, he sat quietly for a long time before muttering to himself softly. There's a problem that has to be solved. If you really like her, it's not impossible to have a relationship. It's not like you can't be more lenient about her parents' matter. Wan Shan, big boss Jiang, who wanted to date, found someone to watch over Wei Wei Bai on the first day of dating. What kind of relationship was this? It was too strange. The examination report was out. Jiang Jiushi took it and flipped through it. Everything is fine. Jiang Jiushi closed the report and closed his eyes. Let's go. All the plans went smoothly. His life was built on plans. Therefore, he really knew that he was moved and had a girl he liked. He also didn't know why he truly liked her. Wei Wei Bai held an ice cream cone and giggled with her dance troupe. A few people were talking about the latest retarded romance movie, shouting that the male lead is so handsome and that the ending is so tragic. I was so moved that I went silly. The system held the needle and felt that it was not the only one who had been slacking off recently. The host doesn't seem to be using her brain anymore. Who could tell that the host was a green tea bitch and a white lotus flower? She was a living example of a sweet and naive person. The system couldn't help but remind him, host, the level of favorability has been at 50 for a very long time, and it hasn't changed. Wei Wei Bai smiled and chatted with her colleagues. At the same time, he sneered at the system. It's good enough that it didn't drop, and you still want it to rise? The system said, you play every day, of course it won't. Wei Wei Bai said, the character setting won't work. This character setting will act like this. If I were to rush indirectly, wouldn't I be the mature type? Jiang Jiushi likes the character setting of a little white rabbit, a little pure, and a little idiot. I'll just maintain the character setting and wait for him to make a move. There was no character setting in any plane, like this plane that was so passive. Jiang Jiushi's mind was abnormal and meticulous. His mind was filled with schemes every day. His IQ was not low either. She had to maintain the character setting, so she could only be passive and not attack. She would wait for the other party to come up with a plan before she could respond. The system said, what if he doesn't make a move? Wei Wei Bai said calmly, then he's not a man. After being the happy girl of the dance troupe, it was time to rest and go home. Quick transmigration system, Male god, come here. Chapter 2035. Wei Wei Bai tidied herself up and walked out with her dancing shoes and bag. A male colleague rushed over from behind. Wei Wei, I'll send you back. Wei Wei Bai's expression was a little unnatural. No need, I can go back by myself. The male colleague smiled warmly. It's not safe for a girl to go alone. I'll send you back. Wei Wei Bai did not seem to know how to reject people, and since they were all familiar with dancing, it was not good to reject. Both of them were dancers, and their figures and appearances were one of the best. Standing together made them look very compatible. After leaving, she did not see a car. The system said, there are 3 men behind you. They're very good at hiding. They're experienced. Wei Wei Bai's first reaction was, kidnapped. The system said, the male lead sent them to see if you're having an affair. Wei Wei Bai was silent for a moment, then said, this is a good idea. I can take the initiative if I'm having an affair. Let a man who had been enduring take the initiative. It was nothing more than jealousy and being cheated on. Wei Wei Bai had been passive for a long time, and she was actually sick of it. Not everyone could be the little idiot princess. The last man did not do it well. The male colleague's car was a motorcycle. He said, Wei Wei, get on. I'll take you back. Wei Wei Bai looked a little sad, suddenly said, treat me to an ice cream. We'll walk back. The male colleague's house was not far from here. The male colleague immediately nodded and dragged the motorcycle to buy 2 ice creams. Then the 2 of them squatted by the roadside and ate the ice cream seriously. As they ate, Wei Wei Bai suddenly sobbed. The male colleague was so shocked that he almost swallowed the spoon that was eating the ice cream. What's wrong? Is the ice cream bad? Wei Wei Bai shook her head, holding back her sobs, and said, I'm just thinking about my parents. The male colleague also knew that there was a problem with her company. After all, the problem was so big that the public opinion on the internet was one-sided and scolding her company. Some people even went to Wei Wei Bai's Weibo to scold her. Wei Wei Bai had not dared to update her Weibo recently. The male colleague sighed and comforted her. You are very good at dancing. Even if the company goes bankrupt, you can still support yourself and your parents. Everyone could see Wei Wei's talent. This kind of talent was walking the path of a dance master. When it came to dancing, there was a world of difference between those who were talented and those who were not. Wei Wei Bai ate ice cream with tears in her eyes. The male colleague saw that she was really pitiful and cute. He couldn't help but reach out and touch her hair. She shuddered and blinked, the tears falling from her eyelashes. Then, she couldn't help but reveal a sincere smile. When Jiang Jiushi came to pick her up, it was just right. He happened to be able to see her smile with tears in her eyes as she faced someone else. Wei Wei Bai adjusted her position so that the sun shone on her face, making her fair and tender skin look pure and beautiful under the sun. The male colleague was also affected by her and couldn't help but smile. When Jiang Jiushi's car drove in, he saw this beautiful scene. Under the warm orange sun, his girl was smiling like a little angel. She was holding ice cream in her hand and looking gently at another man. The 2 of them were smiling especially pure and cute. Wasn't that man the male dancer who had lifted Wei Wei Bai at the door last time? Jiang Jiushi asked the assistant sitting in the front seat. Who is that man? Wan Shan immediately replied, I think it's Miss Bai's partner in the dance troupe. His name is Li Wu. Jiang Jiushi's tone was terrifyingly calm. It looks like they are a good match. Wan Shan, Jiang Jiushi didn't hold it in for long. He opened the door and revealed a gloomy face. Wei Wei. Wei Wei Bai trembled and looked up in panic. She saw Jiang Jiushi looking at her indifferently. The man's strong aura made people not dare to speak. Get in, it's time to go home. Wei Wei Bai was a little hesitant, but she didn't dare to disobey. She could only apologize to the male colleague. Then she took the ice cream and her bag and got into the car. The door was closed. Jiang Jiushi saw that Li Wu was still at the roadside with a worried look. The displeasure in his heart finally crawled out from his eyes. He couldn't suppress his breathing, and it was a little heavy. Wei Wei Bai seemed to see that he was angry and immediately said, It's not that I didn't want to wait for you at the door. It's just that the weather is hot, so I want to buy ice cream. Jiang Jiushi sneered. Is the ice cream delicious? Wei Wei Bai seemed to know that he was angry and was afraid that he would punish her. She immediately stuffed a spoonful of ice cream that was about to melt into his mouth. The sweet coldness spread from the corner of his mouth to his taste buds. Jiang Jioshi's anger was immediately cooled down. He was stunned, but he saw that she was staring at him fearfully, her eyes red and fragile. "Is it sweet?" she asked pitifully. Jiang Jioshi was silent for a long time before replying slowly, "It's sweet. / comma." Chapter 2036. On the way back, Jiang Jioshi couldn't say whether he was happy or not. His expression was indifferent. When his slightly cold gaze swept past Wei Wei by, there would occasionally be a hint of gentleness. But when he looked away, he regained his calm appearance. If one didn't observe carefully, no one would know that his attitude towards Wei Wei Bai was starting to change. Wei Wei Bai obviously knew that Jiang Jioshi wasn't observing her. Her little white flower appearance was very intimidating. Anyway, Jiang Jioshi still had a good impression of her so far. This was probably a happy year for the two-faced big bad wolf and the little idiot angel. Wei Wei Bai calmly thought about how to seduce Jiang Jioshi without batting an eyelid. Jiang Jioshi also calmly thought about how to make Wei Wei Bai look at him differently. At least not now, when she looked at him as if he was a scary pervert. He was full of vigilance. He thought about how she was smiling so happily with that Li Wu guy just now. Even if he knew that there were no other feelings, she still looked so relaxed. If she wasn't like this in front of him, he would panic. Jiang Jioshi's fingers gently landed on his leg. He couldn't help but rub them. If his leg wasn't so cumbersome, he wouldn't have to restrain her like this. Instead, he could take her around. Thinking of this, Jiang Jioshi suddenly said to Luan Shan, "Is there a charity party tonight?" Luan Shan immediately nodded. "Yes, there's an auction." "Didn't you cancel?" Jiang Jioshi. "Let's go." Luan Shan immediately reacted and nodded. "Okay." Then Jiang Jioshi glanced at Wei Wei Bai lightly. "There's an auction tonight. It's a charity party. I need a female companion. Come with me." He actually said this very gently, but he didn't know why it sounded like an order. After all, he was used to being a high and mighty leader. As a result, no matter how gentle the words were, they could be said in an aggressive manner. As expected, Wei Wei Bai's face paled a little. Her lips trembled for a moment before she nodded reluctantly. "Yes." When Jiang Jioshi saw that there was no trace of joy on her face, a trace of doubt flashed through his mind. Other women liked this kind of auction, although it was said to be a charity. But in fact, it was a gathering for business games. The items in the auction were all very expensive. They were all sent by various large companies. It was all for the sake of building a reputation. It could also be considered as advertising fees for the company to promote a positive image. Therefore, once they went to such a place and obtained a few auction items, it was a very happy thing for their female companions, not to mention gaining some connections. This thought only flashed through his mind. Jiang Jioshi didn't show it. He first brought Wei Wei Bai to put on makeup and change her clothes. It was specially made for private resale. When Wei Wei Bai came out, Jiang Jioshi was reading a magazine. Very few men could accompany their female companions here to put on makeup and choose clothes, because it was too long and very boring. However, Jiang Jioshi casually flipped through the magazine and didn't find it too difficult. When he heard the curtain door open, he casually looked up, but his eyes froze. Wei Wei Bai was extremely good-looking. Her long hair was tied up and pinned up with a row of pearl hairpins. She was wearing a gown that was as sparkling as the moon. The elegant shape of the gown didn't have too many decorations. The dress was waist-length and was tied with a thin, light, golden gem chain. On her fair and beautiful face, her cheeks were light pink. The young girl's budding years stunned everyone. To read the full article at https://www.sashu.com// To read on. To facilitate your next reading, you can click on the Chapter 2037. She didn't need to dress up too much or put on too much makeup. She was so beautiful that she was like a scenery. Jiang Jioshi held his breath for a while before his expression returned to normal. He nodded to the designer who came over. This outfit was conservative, yet it fully displayed her beauty. At her age, this outfit was just right. Jiang Jiushi pushed his wheelchair and came to her side. He stretched out his hand and said softly, "When we enter later, remember to stay by my side and don't run around. You will attract the attention of bees and butterflies." Wei Wei Bai was stunned for a moment. Finally, she couldn't take it anymore and lowered her head, pressing her hands heavily on his shoulders. When she was angry, the redness on her face deepened and her eyes became watery. Just now, she was elegant and girlish. Now, she was cute like an explosion. "Jiang Jiushi, are you insulting me? When did I attract the attention of bees and butterflies?" Jiang Jiushi was close to her. The tip of his nose was filled with her scent. The faint feminine fragrance made him lose himself for a moment. So beautiful. The skin was so close, but he couldn't see a single flaw. A teenage girl's skin was so good that water could be squeezed out of it. Jiang Jiushi stared at her for a while before lowering his thick eyelashes and saying calmly, "I was rash." Wei Wei Bai then let go of him and turned around. She seemed to be relieved. It was as though she had used up all her courage to burst out bravely just now. Jiang Jiushi looked deeply at her beautiful back. Under her fair neck, the lines of her body were softer and more beautiful than a flower bud. After looking for a long time, he finally looked away. "I'll go change, and then we'll go to the auction." Jiang Jiushi changed his clothes very quickly. He didn't need to put on makeup and was dressed in a black suit. It was old-fashioned and cold. However, when he wore a well-fitting suit, the best adjective to describe him was handsome. When Jiang Jiushi came out, Wei Wei Bai's eyes stayed on him for a few seconds. She quickly averted her gaze. However, Jiang Jiushi caught the hint of amazement in his eyes. Jiang Jiushi couldn't help but curl his lips as a faint sense of pleasure appeared. Ding! The male lead's favorability is at 55. Auctions were not held according to the rules. Instead, they were held while dancing, drinking, socializing, and auctioning. Everyone was accompanied by a waiter. As long as someone made a bid, the waiter was responsible for calling out the price. When Jiang Jiushi arrived, he was already half an hour late. The auction had just begun. It was a painting from the Qing dynasty. The price had been raised to 1 million. Wan Shan pushed Jiang Jiushi while Wei Wei Bai stood beside him. As soon as they entered, many people looked at Jiang Jiushi. Then came Wei Wei Bai. After all, Jiang Jiushi had never had a woman by his side, not even a female secretary. She also attended the banquet with a male assistant. So when Wei Wei Bai suddenly appeared, many people were ready to make a move. Regardless of whether Jiang Jiushi's legs were crippled or not, he had money. Many women saw that Jiang Jiushi's female companions began to appear. They originally thought that Jiang Jiushi was a gay woman, so their hearts immediately became active. Wei Wei Bai was not excited about the banquet. In fact, she was at ease. Jiang Jiushi was not surprised. After all, she grew up in a good environment. That was why he brought her here. She would be more natural if she dated in a place she was familiar with. The second item was the best jewelry work by a British designer. Jiang Jiushi took a look and found that it looked quite good. Chapter 2038. Many women's eyes immediately lit up, and they could also beg the man beside them to bid for it. Jiang Jiushi narrowed his eyes and looked at Wei Wei Bai beside him. If she was willing to beg him, he would buy everything. Unfortunately, his eyes were thrown to a blind person. Wei Wei Bai was at a loss, calm, and indifferent. It was as if attending the auction with him was a chore, and she couldn't wait to finish it quickly so that she could go back to sleep. Jiang Jiushi was a little disappointed, but he still asked the waiter to bid, even if Wei Wei Bai didn't like it. He also wanted to buy it for her. Jiang Jiushi bid a few times and successfully won the jewelry. The third item was still a piece of jewelry, but it was a bracelet, an ice-type imperial green jade bracelet. Jiang Jiushi asked about the wrist size and reached out to pinch Wei Wei Bai's slender wrist. After confirming that it was Wei Wei Bai's wrist size, he nodded to Luan Shan. Luan Shan immediately ordered the waiter to bid. It was rare to see this piece of jade. Whether it was the width or the size, it was very delicate. The green was also very young. It was very suitable for fair skin, and it was also very suitable for young women. The bracelet was not cheap, and there were many people bidding. Jiang Joshi had been very calm the whole time. He decided to buy her some jewelry or something. How could a girl not have some expensive jewelry? His way of thinking was similar to raising a daughter. Wei Wei Bai was too bored. After drinking a few glasses of wine, her face began to turn red. She hesitated for a moment and finally said to Jiang Joshi, "I'm going to the bathroom." Jiang Joshi's fingers rubbed his leg unnaturally before nodding. "Let Luan Shan go with you." He actually wanted to take her there himself, but his leg was not convenient. These few days, he felt uncomfortable because of his leg. It was very strong. Wei Wei Bai's face turned even redder, and she immediately said angrily, "No, I know where the bathroom is." Jiang Joshi glanced at her gorgeous face and knew that she was shy. He curled his lips and nodded. "Go." Wei Wei Bai immediately fled. Seeing her leave, Jiang Joshi immediately said to a waiter next to him, "Follow her." The waiter immediately nodded respectfully and followed her very professionally. Jiang Joshi saw Wei Wei Bai leave. He closed his eyes. The bracelet was also successfully. Jiang Joshi didn't feel much joy. He suddenly muttered to himself, "What should I do to make her happier?" Wan Shan. He didn't dare. Jiang Joshi sighed. "I'm not that fierce. Why is she so afraid of me?" Wan Shan. Imprison, force, threaten. Who isn? Of course, no matter how much a jerk the big boss was, he was still a breadwinner. Jiang Joshi finally reached out to support his chin. "It seems that we need a further plan to make her treat me better." Wan Shan. Shouldn't a suitor be nicer to her? Why did Jiang Joshi want Wei Wei Bai to treat him better? No wonder he couldn't get the girl. Wei Wei Bai played games in the bathroom for a while. She was really bored. She came out to play. When it was about time, she washed her hands and went out. However, when she went out, she saw Jiang Joshi going over. A woman stopped her. "Do you know who I am?" The woman's gorgeous makeup was very threatening. Wei Wei Bai, cannon fodder, and a vicious female supporting lead. Wei Wei Bai, who was so bored that she hid to play games, was excited and had something to do. She adjusted her attitude and said calmly, "Get out of the way." To make herself more detestable, Wei Wei Bai's eyes were full of disdain. The woman immediately said, "I'm the only daughter of the XX group's boss. I'm going on a blind date with Jiang Joshi recently. Who do you think you are?" Wei Wei Bai was touched. It had been a long time since she saw such a straightforward and cute evil cannon fodder. How nostalgic. Wei Wei Bai couldn't help but silently wipe her tears of gratitude. Then, she looked at her helplessly. "Sorry, I didn't know you were going on a blind date with him." She was as obedient and soft as she could be. The woman thought that she was scared. However, Wei Wei Bai said lightly that only the woman could hear. "But he won't let go of me. I'm also very troubled. It's too embarrassing to be so charming." The woman was angry. She went forward and was about to slap Wei Wei Bai's face. Wei Wei Bai took a step back. She nimbly took a wine glass from the table beside her and splashed the wine on the woman's face. This farce quickly attracted the attention of others. Jiang Joshi turned his wheelchair around and saw Wei Wei Bai standing by the wine table. She seemed to be very angry. Her whole body was trembling and her eyes were red. She looked very pitiful. His girl had only been gone for a few minutes, and now she was being bullied. Jiang Joshi immediately came over. The woman's face was full of wine. She had never been treated so shamefully before. Just as she was about to flare up, she saw the person she wanted to curry favor with. She immediately put away her anger and looked pitiful. "Mr. Jiang, you have to give me an explanation. This woman suddenly stopped me, insulted me, and even splashed wine on me." Jiang Joshi didn't look at the victim at all. Instead, he looked at Wei Wei Bai and saw that tears of grievance were welling up in her eyes. Jiang Joshi's eyes turned cold. His voice was extremely calm. "Did you say that my people bullied you?" The woman's mouth twitched, and she nodded angrily. Jiang Joshi gestured to the waiter. The waiter immediately came over. He took a glass of wine and suddenly splashed it on the woman's face. Then his voice was so cold that it made people shudder. Unfortunately, I have the same hobby as her. I also like to bully people. Chapter 2039. Once this farce was over, the woman was taken care of and asked to leave. She was dealt with very quickly and did not attract much attention. Jiang Jiushi glanced at the people around him coldly and realized that everyone pretended not to see anything. They did not embarrass Wei Wei by too much. Jiang Jiushi reached out to Wei Wei Bai, and his attitude became gentle. Let's go. It's not fun here. Let's go back. He wanted to bring her here to have fun. He did not want to make her feel bad. Jiang Jiushi's heart raced. He even had thoughts about that woman just now. Everyone knew that he was not fond of women. It was not easy for him to bring someone to a public place. Anyone with a little bit of insight would know that Wei Wei Bai's status was different. Those women with the IQ of sows did not think about their own status. They even dared to make things difficult for the girl he brought out. Jiang Jiushi was actually a little narrow-minded and was extremely self-disciplined and cold. If anyone made him unhappy, he would follow the prescribed order and plan to make them disappear. Wei Wei Bai looked at his outstretched hand with a wronged look in her eyes. She was very cute and obedient. She hesitated for a while before saying softly, I didn't cause you any trouble, right? A faint smile finally appeared in Jiang Jiushi's indifferent and emotionless eyes. How could she be so obedient? Jiang Jiushi pushed the wheelchair in front of her and reached out to grab her fair fingers. He pulled her and said in a calm and domineering voice, in the future, if anyone gets in your way, you can bully them. I will deal with all the trouble you cause and all the mess you make. Tell me what you like. I'll give you whatever I can. He wanted to make her smile. Don't be afraid of him. But he could not do anything about it. That woman who blocked the way and bullied her today was also good. At least his little princess would know that she was different from others in his heart. Jiang Jiushi's calm heart was filled with rotten and dark emotions. It was rare for Wei Wei Bai, who was like sunshine, to come in. It was inevitable that he would start to pamper her. Even if his feelings for her were not deep enough to give her his life, he could still give her the glory, splendor, and wealth that a woman wanted, or the life of a superior. Jiang Jiushi rationally analyzed his own feelings and found that he had not lost control too much, so he allowed his thoughts of doting on Wei Wei Bai to flow out. When he said this, Jiang Jiushi didn't feel very happy. These were the words that came out of his mouth instinctively. But as soon as he finished speaking, he keenly noticed the absent-minded change in her eyes. She stared at him blankly for a few seconds. Her eyes were a little uneasy, and her face was slightly red. It seemed that her shyness had made her skin burn. Jiang Jiushi looked at her strangely. For a moment, he couldn't wrap his head around it. Bai Weiwei's fingers trembled as he held them. She quickly bowed her head and lowered her beautiful neck. Her voice was soft. Then let's go. She spoke uneasily and shyly. Jiang Jiushi's heart was suddenly illuminated by a flash of lightning. Was she happy? After being stunned for a few seconds, Jiang Jiushi calmly turned his head and said to Luan Shan, let's go. Luan Shan immediately pushed the wheelchair. But Jiang Jiushi's hand was tightly holding Wei Wei Bai's. Ding! The male lead's affection has increased to 60. When Jiang Jiushi returned home, the massage doctor came. Wei Wei Bai had seen this doctor several times, so she didn't find it strange. Jiang Jiushi glanced at him and finally let go of his hand. As they had held each other for too long, their fingers were warm and moist. Once he let go, his fingers became empty and cold again. Transmigration system. Male god, come here. / transmigration system. Male god, come here. / transmigration system. Male god, come here. Transmigration system. Male god, come here. To make it easier for you to read next time, you can click the button. You can see it when you open the bookshelf next time. If you like Transmigration system, male god, come here, comma. Chapter 2040. Jiang Jiushi's eyes flashed with a strange emotion. Then he said, go change first. I'll ask the nanny to help you. That banquet made her uncomfortable, and she couldn't eat much. She would be hungry. Wei Wei Bai hesitated for a while, then nodded and turned to go back to the room. Jiang Jiushi looked up at her back until the door was closed. Then he said to the doctor, "Today's massage will be suspended. I'll get someone to pick you up tomorrow morning. Then you can come to the company to massage me." After all, he was a big employer, so the doctor was very understanding and obedient, saying that he would wait for the call. Then, the doctor quickly went home. Jiang Jiushi saw that the doctor had left, and there was a hint of decadence in his eyes. He actually couldn't bear it. The massage continued after he came in. Once he felt a little moved, he would actually feel a sense of inferiority because of this almost non-existent feeling. And this feeling was trembling with fear. Jiang Jiushi tugged at his collar and couldn't help but complain, so troublesome. He originally wanted to raise a little lover that was pleasing to the eye. In the end, he raised a grudge. Now, he was no longer raising a little lover, he was raising a little ancestor. What was more frightening was that he actually thought it was good. Jiang Jiushi calmly calculated his emotional fluctuations. It was okay. He wouldn't forget himself because of Wei Wei Bai. It was okay to fall in love, and it was okay to pamper her. He wouldn't give anything else. Jiang Jiushi was very clear about himself. For a person like him, if he really fell in love with someone, it would be a situation where he wouldn't rest until he was dead. So, he suppressed his feelings for Wei Wei Bai and never really crossed the line. Wei Wei Bai finished showering and putting on her clothes. Then she heard the system counting. What's wrong? Recently, the system was cold and perfunctory. It felt like it was in love and abandoned its poor host. System, count how many flowers he embroidered, how many life points he could sell. Of course, he didn't say out loud. If the host found out that he was doing embroidery for a living, then he wouldn't have any dignity left. He immediately put on the airs of a system. Have you been slacking off recently? It's one thing for your favorability to rise so slowly, but you don't have a plan and you're not active in your strategy. There's no future for you to just eat and wait for death. You should be as hardworking and cute as me. Wei Wei Bai was speechless at the system for a while, then explained reluctantly, "The favorability has increased too, right? I've already established the character of a little white flower, so I can't immediately change my character and slap myself in the face." The system said, "You're slacking off, you're slacking off, you're slacking off." Important things had to be emphasized thrice. Wei Wei Bai was shocked. "How did you know?" "I forgot that the host's face is so thick." Wei Wei Bai smiled. "All right, I'm not slacking off. I'm just resting. Have you forgotten that the side quest hasn't come out yet?" Every single side mission would definitely make him feel like dying. It was even harder to deal with in the main storyline. When she first arrived, she had been on guard against the side quest. In the end, after a few months, her favorability had already reached 65. Unexpectedly, there was no movement at all from the branch. This made Wei Wei Bai even more afraid to do anything bad. The system was so embroidered that it lost its mind. "Oh, that's right. Why hasn't the side quest come out yet? Didn't the old Demon King of the Black Mountain appear very early in the branch missions? There wasn't even the slightest trace of this plane." Seeing that was about time, Wei Wei Bai opened the door and was about to leave. "Ding, I heard that the host is missing me." I, with great compassion, respond to your humble secret love. The side mission has been activated in advance. Wei Wei Bai. Transmigration system. Adonis, come here. /transmigration system. Adonis, come here. // transmigration system. Adonis, come here. Download transmigration system. Adonis, come here. Mobile transmigration system. Adonis, come here, comma. Chapter 2041. She wanted to smash her own mouth. Why did she mention the mission? Why did she mention the mission? Please wait for 10 seconds. 10, 9, 8, 7. Okay, your parents are dead. They were hit by a car and died on the spot. Wei Wei Bai felt a little strange. Wait, why did you ask me to wait for 10 seconds? Oh, your parents didn't die just now. They just died now. Wei Bai, this was too casual. How could they die so easily? Was it because of the mission? The mission was so crazy that it didn't have a mission. It was just killing people and arson to create missions. Wei Bai had a fuck you mission expression on her face as she listened to the mission continue to be announced. Your parents are dead. Your company is bankrupt. Your life is miserable. Please complete the small mission of tormenting your enemy, Jiang Joshi. Wei Bai, her enemy, even emphasized his name in parentheses. Was he afraid that she would find the wrong person? What kind of mission was this? Forced revenge, forced tragedy, forced something to do because he couldn't stand her slacking off? She just wanted to eat a sweet cookie. Couldn't she be lazy for a while? This stupid mission. Beep. It felt the strong love of the mission. The mission is very touched. It detected the preference of the host for the little white flower character. Host, please maintain the image of a delicate little angel and complete this revenge. The mission punishment is real-time monitoring. If you destroy the image, you will vomit blood. If you fail the mission, face-to-face with the system, back-to-back, and dance hand-in-hand to the dance of the bumblebee. At first, Bai Weiwei was still thinking about how to perform the little angel's revenge. Vomiting blood was okay. After all, Lin Daiyu's sister was a classic image. As for the mission punishment, she also felt that it was a dance with the system. It was not difficult. Wait, face-to-face, back-to-back. What kind of position was this? She felt like she was watching a horror movie. Was this a position that a human could do? Wei Bai and the system. Then the system said, "Let me be clear. I am also a human image. Although I don't want to be a human image, I really am a human image. That's why this dance pose. It wasn't something that a single person could do." Wei Bai indicated that she understood. The branch was still that be *TCH. She was used to it. Wei Bai stood in place for 3 seconds to calm down. Then, she looked up again with a gentler expression and purer eyes. She was a little angel, who hadn't been an angel for 3 to 5 years. Children are all angels, understand? Wasn't it easy to act cute and natural? Well, it wasn't easy at all. The little angel only knew how to forgive and not take revenge. Coming to take revenge with an angelic face was a matter of not allowing her persona to crumble, but she had to do something that crumbled her persona. Wasn't this making things difficult for her? Wei Bai expressed that this trashy side quest was just giving her trouble. When she walked out of the door, she saw that Jiang Joshi had already taken a shower and was wearing home clothes. He sat on the sofa in the living room with the TV on. There were freshly cut fruits and some desserts on the table. The nanny was busy preparing supper in the kitchen. Jiang Joshi was reading a book instead of staring at the TV. Wei Bai glanced at the TV. It was an idol drama or something. Jiang Joshi heard footsteps and looked up at Wei Bai. Because she had just washed her hair, it was hanging out to dry. Her eyes were wet, and her eyelashes seemed to contain moisture from the shower. She seemed to look even cuter and softer. Slash. Chapter 2042. Jiang Joshi's heart skipped a beat, but he didn't allow his emotions to overflow immediately. Instead, he said calmly, "Come and sit down. We'll sleep after supper." Wei Bai nodded and walked over. The sofa was very long. He sat on the left while she sat on the right. There was a distance of 2 people between her and him. Wei Bai placed her hands on her thighs obediently. Her fingers were bent softly and her legs were closed obediently. Then, she watched the television quietly. Jiang Joshi saw that her posture was so obedient and that she was so far away from him. He couldn't help but rub his fingers as though he was reminiscing about the moment when they held hands. Then, his posture was very calm and his voice was very gentle. "Wei, do you want some fruit?" Wei Bai shook her head. "No need," Jiang Joshi said, "but I want to eat." Wei Bai looked at him blankly for a moment. Then, her mind seemed to have a little inspiration. She moved the fruit on the table clumsily in front of Jiang Joshi. Jiang Joshi supported his chin with his hand and leaned against the sofa. Because he had just washed his black hair, it hung over his forehead and added a few strands of casual gentleness to it. There was a hint of his usual dominance in his voice. "I can't reach it. Feed me." Wei Wei Bai paused for a few seconds before saying, "Oh." She seemed to feel that this request was a little unexpected. Jiang Jiushi didn't say anything. Instead, he looked up at her with a deep gaze. This gaze was extremely oppressive. Bai Weiwei frowned in distress. Then, she reluctantly moved to Jiang Jiushi's side. She reached out to hold a small fork with fruit, forked a piece of apple, and brought it to his mouth. It was a distance that was neither too far nor too close. That piece of apple didn't even touch his lips. Jiang Jiushi wasn't picky. Instead, he moved his body and lowered his head to eat the apple. Jiang Jiushi stretched out his hand unhurriedly and said, "Delicious." Wei Wei Bai's face turned even redder. She held the fork in her hand and was at a loss. Jiang Jiushi's voice was calm and steady. "Don't you like to feed me?" Wei Wei Bai hesitated for a moment before reluctantly shaking her head. "No." There seemed to be a smile in Jiang Jiushi's eyes. "So you like to feed me? It seems that I'm not that annoying." Wei Wei Bai pursed her lips, and the shyness in her eyes was particularly obvious. If it weren't for the fact that it was inappropriate, she would have covered her face and run away. Jiang Jiushi, on the other hand, enjoyed the teasing that eroded her habits little by little. He wanted her to get closer to him little by little. As long as they were together for a long time, he had the ability to make her like him. Even if he didn't like it, he had to like it. Jiang Jiushi's smiling eyes contained a kind of paranoid darkness. Jiang Jiushi stretched out his slender fingers and gently tapped his lips. "Since you like it, continue to feed me." This was simply the behavior of a bandit. Relying on the fact that she didn't dare to resist, he wanted to make things difficult for her that he would never do normally. As expected, Wei Wei Bai's cheeks puffed up a little. It was a very childish expression, but her face was small, her eyes were round, and her skin was too white and tender. Her appearance was too cute and harmless. This kind of childish expression was indescribably cute and didn't feel out of place. The smile in Jiang Jiushi's eyes deepened. By the time the nanny came out with 2 bowls of fragrant noodles, Wei Wei Bai had already fed Jiang Jiushi more than 10 pieces of fruit. Button. Chapter 2043. Most of the fruits on the plate were destroyed by him. In the end, the blush on Wei Wei Bai's face was not as strong as before. She slowly got used to it, and this was what Jiang Jiushi wanted to see. The noodles were sprinkled with crispy, chopped green onions, rich broth, thin slices of meat, and green vegetables. It was extremely delicious. It was so delicious that it aroused one's appetite. In the plot of the TV, the male and female leads were eating. The male lead invited the female lead to eat snacks at a roadside shop. The setting of this idol drama was a little different. The male lead was relatively poor. Although he would make a comeback in the future, he was not a typical Cinderella. Bai Weiwei's attention was all on the noodles. Her stomach had long been hungry, if it weren't for the fact that she had to take into account the setting. She would have order takeout. She could only complete the mission when she was full, so her attention was all on eating the noodles. Wei Wei Bai held the bowl and was eating the noodles in small bites. But she noticed that Jiang Jiushi was staring at the TV. This man's personality did not seem to like illogical TV shows like idol dramas. Sure enough, she heard him say, "There was a time when I was very poor." Wei Wei Bai's eating speed slowed down. When one was hungry, what was the point of thinking about the good when eating? It was fine to think about the past after eating. Although Wei Wei Bai complained, she still showed a trace of curiosity on her face. Jiang Jiushi saw that her interest was aroused and said with a smile, "At that time, I only ate 2 meals a day. Sometimes, I only had 2 steam buns in the morning. So the best meal at that time was a rare meal of noodles. There was no meat, but there was an egg." Wei Wei Bai hesitated for a moment and looked at her bowl. In the end, she reluctantly picked up 2 pieces of meat and put them in his bowl. Jiang Jiushi had a purpose for chatting with her. He wanted her to understand him, understand a better version of him. That way, she would not be so guarded against him. That way, the two of them could be closer. The man with a motive lowered his eyelashes to hide the dark conspiracy in his eyes. However, Wei Wei Bai suddenly gave him 2 pieces of meat as if he was a beggar. The smile on his face froze. He heard Wei Wei Bai say, "I've never been hungry, so I'm still very grateful that my parents love me so much." When Jiang Jiushi heard her mention Father Bai and Mother Bai, his face darkened. Of course, he quickly suppressed his gloomy expression. He was afraid that he would scare away Wei Wei Bai, who had finally gotten close to him. Her parents didn't love her at all. Once the company went bankrupt, he would only show that he wanted her. He immediately sent his daughter over. This kind of love was very cheap. Usually, he would treat her well, but once he ran out of money, he would abandon her. In Jiang Jioshi's eyes, they were scumbags. Although Jiang Jioshi didn't reveal a cold expression, he couldn't help but speak. "Did they abandon you and run away?" Wei Wei Bai immediately felt a little sad. She held the bowl and looked at the meat in it. After a few seconds, she blinked her red eyes and started to eat the noodles without saying anything. It seemed that she had been provoked by Jiang Jioshi. She was so embarrassed that she couldn't say anything. She could only hide her sadness by eating the noodles. Jiang Jioshi saw that she was eating the noodles at a much faster speed than before. He knew that she must be embarrassed. That was why she was eating the noodles, to hide her embarrassment. He couldn't help but frown. After a few seconds of silence, he moved his body. Slash. Chapter 2044. He leaned towards her and gently placed his hand on her thin shoulder. Wei Wei Bai trembled. Jiang Jioshi suddenly said softly, "Don't be sad. I'm not like them. Even if there's an egg left in the bowl, I'll give you a third. I won't run away just like that." Bai Weiwei stared blankly for a moment. Then she took a sip of the broth before she reacted and looked at him. Then she looked at the meat in his bowl. Jiang Jioshi took the opportunity to pick up 2 pieces of meat and put them in her bowl. It was as if this could show that he would not abandon her, even if he was poor. Wei Wei Bai's eyes flashed with a trace of emotion. Then, when Jiang Jioshi wasn't paying attention, she couldn't help but twitch the corners of her mouth at the 2 pieces of meat in the bowl. These 2 pieces of meat were still in her bowl. Jiang Jioshi was really stingy. He would give her a third of an egg. He even took the 2 pieces of meat that she gave him. Could it be that he disliked the fact that she took them with her chopsticks and pretended to be affectionate and took them back? Wei Wei Bai finished twitching the corners of her mouth and waited for Jiang Jioshi to notice her. She immediately looked touched. Then she ate the 2 pieces of meat and drank 2 more mouthfuls of soup. "Don't waste it on stingy Jiang. You're stingy, I'm stingy too." After eating the noodles, Jiang Jioshi asked the nanny to clean up. Then he said to Wei Wei Bai, "Go to sleep. Don't you have dance rehearsals tomorrow?" When he said this, he reached out to the wheelchair beside him. The man's expression seemed to be a little more difficult, but he still forced himself up and tried to put himself in the wheelchair. Wei Wei Bai couldn't help but take a few steps forward and reach out to help him. The smile in Jiang Jioshi's eyes deepened, as if some trick had succeeded. He followed her strength and let himself sit in the wheelchair. However, his hand seemed to have accidentally tugged at her. She stumbled and sat down on his lap. Wei Wei Bai was stunned for a moment and immediately wanted to get up. But she heard him say in a low voice, "Slow down, your hair is hooking on my button." Wei Wei Bai looked up and saw that her hair was caught in Jiang Jioshi's hands, and a few strands of her hair were wrapped around his buttons. It looked like Jiang Jioshi had deliberately twisted it. The order of the entanglement was the same. If it weren't for Wei Wei Bai's powerful ability to control her expression, the corners of her eyes would have twitched. She immediately sat down obediently, not daring to move. Jiang Jioshi smiled and unhurriedly untied her hair, feeling the softness of her body against his. His voice was incomparably soft. "I just bought a few pieces of jewelry at the auction. Send them over tomorrow, and I'll have them placed on your table." Wei Wei Bai immediately wanted to refuse with a frown. Jiang Jioshi interrupted her. "After all, you're already mine, so you have to wear nice clothes. Otherwise, people will think that I'm going bankrupt." Wei Wei Bai immediately didn't dare to say anything, but she hesitated for a while before saying softly, "Then I'll return it to you in the future." Jiang Jioshi looked up lazily and said in a light tone, "Oh, I'll wait for you to return it to me." After untying her hair, Jiang Jioshi reluctantly let her get up. Wei Wei Bai reached out and smoother hair. Her dragonfly-like eyelashes trembled a few times. Under the light, her delicate appearance was exceptionally beautiful. The conspiracy, calculation, and caution in Jiang Jioshi's eyes were all gone. It was pure appreciation for his girl's beauty and a deep possessiveness. Wei Wei Bai seemed to have thought of something. Pursing her cute lips, her fingertips fell from her hair. She suddenly turned and lowered her head, kissing his forehead gently. It was a soft touch, and she even kissed the hair on his forehead. Her voice was a little stuttering. Good night, Joshi. Then, as if she had done something terrible, she covered her face with her hands and immediately fled into the room in front. The door closed. Jiang Jiushi was still in the same place. There was a rare look of confusion in his deep eyes. When he finally reacted, he realized that he had received a goodnight kiss. It was a very, very beautiful goodnight kiss. The corners of Jiang Jioshi's mouth began to curve up, and his smile brightened. He suddenly felt that if he only had one egg, he could give her half of it. Ding! The male lead's favorability has increased to 65. The download address is at https://www.sashu.com is at https://m.sashu.com//. Chapter 2045. He thought about the egg problem. Jiang Jiushi knocked his forehead helplessly. He had been led astray by Wei Wei Bai. He could open many egg factories now. He slowly wanted to return to his room when his phone suddenly rang. Jiang Jiushi glanced at the phone number. It was to monitor the Bai couple. His gaze became dangerous. He had forgotten about this matter during this period of time. He only asked the people on the other side to monitor them. He picked up the phone and listened for a while. His gaze was extremely cold. Jiang Jiushi was silent for a few seconds before looking at Wei Wei Bai's door. Then, he moved his wheelchair unhurriedly and returned to his room. After ensuring that it was soundproof, Jiang Jioshi's cold expression was unusually gloomy. Are they dead? The person on the other side said, after 3 hours of rescue. One of them had ruptured internal organs and lost a lot of blood, and the other had a bone pierced into his heart. They couldn't be saved. Jiang Jiushi said, cremate their bodies and bring them back to the country. Don't leak the news of their deaths. The person on the other side immediately responded respectfully. Jiang Jiushi put down the phone, and his expression suddenly became ugly. He said viciously, why did you have to die now? What can you two pieces of trash do other than being a hindrance? When they were young, they ran away after bumping into him. They were clearly rich, but they allowed him to lie in the hospital and watch his legs be crippled. They definitely didn't give him any medical fees. Now, he had finally opened up Wei Wei Bai's heart a little, and he had also instructed the people monitoring them to make their lives better. In the end, they actually ran over and crashed into a car. Jiang Jiushi felt extremely irritable. It wasn't the feeling of revenge or dissatisfaction. Instead, it was a kind of inexplicable panic. He firmly suppressed this useless emotion. Many plans flashed through his mind, but every one of them would make Wei Wei Bai very sad. Should he tell her or not? Jiang Jioshi's eyes were filled with ruthlessness as he gripped his phone tightly. After taking a deep breath, Jiang Jiushi gritted his teeth and called Luan Shan, asking him to pick up the ashes of that scum. He also instructed them not to leak any information. Not all. After all the matters had been dealt with, Jiang Jiushi slowly exhaled and then closed his eyes to rest. After a while, he finally recovered. His thoughts gradually became clear. He no longer had any obsession with revenge. He didn't feel very happy either. It could even be said that things like revenge could not arouse his emotions at all. This was the first thought that flashed through his mind when he heard the news. What if Wei Wei Bai found out? Would she be heartbroken? So heartbroken that if she found out that her parents were under him, she would start spying on them and indirectly cause their deaths. Would she blame him? This kind of lowly thought was actually able to take root in his mind. It was simply inconceivable. Jiang Jiushi reached out and rubbed his temples, frowning as he fell into deep thought. But the more he thought about it, the more he felt that his feelings for Wei Wei Bai were starting to get out of control. The night passed. Wei Wei Bai ate her fill and slept well. She woke up refreshed and washed up for breakfast. Jiang Jiushi was not there. He went to work early. The system squinted its eyes as it embroidered and said, "The male lead knows that your parents are dead. He is now hiding the news and getting someone to pick up your parents' ashes." Wei Wei Bai said calmly as she ate, "I want to take revenge on him. The more difficult part is how do I know that my cheap parents are dead?" After all, with Jiang Jiushi's identity, it was very easy for him to hide the death of two people. To read the ad, https://www.sashu.com/to read at https://www.sashu.com.txt to read at https://m.sashu.com. Chapter 2046. In addition to the mess in the Bai family, her pitiful parents did not dare to return to the country. Once the Bai family settled the score, the two of them would be directly sent to prison for paying taxes. So even if Jiang Jiushi said that her parents had to stay abroad, she had no reason to doubt it. The system said, "Why don't you go to the company immediately and send the ashes to the male lead this afternoon?" Wei Wei Bai wiped her mouth and nodded. Good idea." Luan Shan carefully held two small wooden boxes. Jiang Jiushi did not even look up. He signed the document and said calmly, "Put them on the table. Later, contact the funeral industry and get them two connected graves. They'll be buried tomorrow." When he said this, Jiang Jiushi's cold eyes did not have a trace of emotion. Luan Shan could not help but ask, "Aren't you going to inform Miss Bai? After all, they were her parents, and they were not the ones who killed them, right? This was an accident." Even the bus driver who killed the Bai couple had been arrested and sent to the police station. According to Jiang Jiushi, they had to be sentenced. It could not be done privately, and it could not be done without responsibility. Luan Shan did not know Jiang Jiushi's thoughts. He wanted to find a scapegoat to deal with Wei Wei Bai's grief and anger in the future. In fact, when the Bai couple died, if he immediately informed Wei Wei Bai, Luan Shan felt that Wei Wei Bai would be sad for a period of time. However, it was better that Jiang Jiushi kept it a secret now. In the future, if Wei Wei Bai accidentally found out, wouldn't it be obvious that there was something wrong with Jiang Jiushi? If there was no problem, why would he hide the fact that her parents died? This did not seem like something Jiang Jiushi would do. That was too stupid. Jiang Jiushi paused slightly as he signed his name. His well-defined fingers even curled up a little nervously. Then, when Luan Shan did not notice, he raised his cold black eyes, and his voice was cold and cruel. "There's no need to inform her. She has nothing to do with the Bai family now." She naively thought that signing a 3-year contract really meant 3 years. It was not clear at all if he did not want to let go. Not just 3 years, but 30 years. He had the ability to control her for the rest of her life. When Jiang Jiushi had those thoughts about Wei Wei Bai, he did not let go. So she had nothing to do with anyone else, including her parents, friends, and relatives. Jiang Jiushi's roots had rotted away, even though there was a trace of sunshine called Wei Wei Bai in his dark heart. He was still the bad guy who rotted in the mud and would never get better. Sometimes he even had the urge to pull the ignorant girl and push her into his dark and cruel heart, so that she could no longer look at him so naively. Otherwise, he felt that sometimes he was not worthy of her. Luan Shan looked at Jiang Jiushi's eyes that were as dark as the abyss and felt a chill in his heart. Suddenly, there was a light knock on the door. Jiang Jiushi and Luan Shan sensed that something was wrong and immediately frowned. The knock on the door was too soft. The people here were all in a hurry, and the knocking was especially crisp. Before the two of them could react, the door had already opened, and then Wei Wei Bai poked her head in. She had a flower bun in her hair, and under her long eyelashes, a pair of clear almond eyes, warm and soft. Wei Wei Bai revealed a shy smile, her cheeks as red as peach blossoms. "You're all here. // Chapter 2047. Wan Shan and Jiang Jiushi both looked at the wooden box on the table at the same time. Wan Shan immediately blocked the wooden box and said with a smile, "Miss Bai, why are you here? You can call me if you want to come. I'll send a driver to pick you up immediately." Wei Wei Bai's eyes were dazed, and she shook her head cutely. "Did I disturb your work? But that sister said I could come up." "Which sister? How did she come up?" "She had to go through the reception on the first floor and then the secretariat outside the office. Only then could she knock on the door here." Jiang Jioshi's fingers that were holding the fountain pen were a little white, but his expression had become calm. He didn't even show a trace of panic. Wei Wei Bai's eyes inadvertently fell on the table. The two wooden boxes were too eye-catching. When no one was looking, the two men revealed a hint of suppressed nervousness. But Wei Wei Bai only glanced at them indifferently and didn't seem to notice anything wrong. She smiled a little shyly. "When I passed by a dessert shop just now, I saw mango sago and accidentally bought too much, so I brought some for you to eat." "Wan Shan, they don't like desserts." Jiang Jiushi smiled gently. "This is my favorite dessert." "Wan Shan, I like it too." Jiang Jiushi looked at him darkly. "Wan Shan, as if I don't like it at all." After saying that he didn't like it, Wan Shan immediately pretended to be busy and cleaned up the table. He carried the two big boxes and walked out calmly. We passed by Wei Wei Bai. Wei Wei Bai said to the system, "Tongzi." The system looked calm and then snapped its fingers. Wan Shan's originally steady footsteps suddenly felt a sharp pain in his ankle. It seemed that because he walked too fast, his whole body suddenly fell forward. The box fell off in his hand. The lid of the wooden box was not locked, and the urn inside fell out. The ashes inside were scattered all over the floor, and there was no distinction between them. Bai Wei Wei, carrying Zimalu, jumped back in fright. For a moment, she didn't seem to recognize what was on the ground. Jiang Jioshi's indifferent expression finally showed a hint of emotion. He immediately said, "Wei Wei, come here." Bai Wei Wei's almond eyes widened. She glanced at the things on the ground and finally reacted. "Ashes." Wan Shan reacted quickly and immediately burst into tears. "My parents. They just passed away. As their son, I didn't see them for the last time. That's why I brought the urn with me. I wanted to see it and think of them." Wei Wei Bai stared at him blankly. "Holy shit, vicious, werewolf, wave annihilation." The urn was still in good condition. Wan Shan immediately bent down to pick up the ashes that had fallen out and put them back in. Then he put it back into the box and ran away with it. Wei Wei Bai carried the sago and hesitated. She didn't dare to go in. The ground was full of ashes. Although it was hard to see, it was impossible that there was nothing left. Wan Shan took it away. There must be more on the ground. Jiang Jiushi seemed to see that she was frightened. He slowly came over in his wheelchair. It was as if he could hear the screams of the remaining ashes on the ground under his wheels. Wei Wei Bai's somewhat dazed eyes had a hint of confusion and cuteness. Jiang Jiushi reached out and took the sago from her. Then, he couldn't help but smile sincerely. He was really happy, because she started to let down her guard against him. She even knew how to take the initiative to get close to him. The download address is at https://www.sashu. You can see it when you open the bookshelf next time, if you like. Chapter 2048. Jiang Jiushi had been waiting for this moment for a long time. He had been suppressing his dark desires and not letting himself show his ferocious face, just so that she would not be frightened. After that night, she was especially afraid of him. He had overestimated her courage. So during this period of time, he had been tolerating her like a saint. And all this was because she took the initiative to kiss him goodnight last night and a simple dessert this afternoon. And it made him feel that everything was worth it. Jiang Jiushi opened the dessert box and took out a disposable spoon, saying, "Why did you suddenly think of bringing me desserts?" Wei Wei Bai's expression was still a little unfocused, as if she felt that the urn was very scary. Her red eyes were a little hesitant, but when she heard his words, The strange feeling just now changed its target. Her face was a little red. I just bought too much. What a poor excuse. Jiang Jiushi did not expose her shyness. She had always been so timid, childish, and naive. He did not know that her family raised her like this. Were they not afraid that she would be kidnapped by bad people? Look at now. The Bai couple had become ashes. Raising a cute and naive girl, it was a good thing for a heinous person like him. Jiang Jiushi sighed insincerely in his heart, slowly eating the dessert that he did not like. It was rare that he felt that this thing was quite delicious. Wei Bai and the system looked at him with a face of... They thought that the assistant was ruthless enough. They did not expect the boss to be even more awesome. Sitting on the ashes and eating with relish. This scene stunned the dumbass for at least 3 seconds. Wei Bai said, Tongzi, I think that if I really wanted to take revenge, Jiang Jiushi would burn me into ashes and eat it with rice. The system said, think about it, face to face, back to back. Wei Bai said, can we face from side to side? This position was very difficult, but it could be done. The system did not wait for a reply. All of a sudden, a notification rang out. Face. Yes. Face. Face. Wei Bai and the system were speechless. After Jiang Jiushi finished eating, the nervousness in his heart disappeared. Wanshan did not understand why he told Wei Bai that her parents were dead. If she hadn't approached him last night, she did not give him a kiss. She didn't let him see that she liked his hope. He would not make such a stupid decision. Instead, he would follow Wanshan's plan. She pushed all the blame for her parents' deaths to others, but he was very clear. Most of the time, she was so well-behaved because her parents were still around. She was a good child. She wanted her parents to live a better life. That was why she had been so obedient during this period of time. If her parents were not around, the good feeling she had for him would disappear again. Jiang Jiushi felt that he needed more time. Her fondness for him was completely fixed in her heart. It would be safer to talk about her parents' deaths when the time came. A girl like Wei Bai would definitely be very loyal when it came to her first love. When the time came, he would coax her and this matter would be over. But now, he could not take the risk of her liking him back. Anyway, it was enough as long as he kept it a secret. After Jiang Jiushi finished his dessert, he brought her out and said, I'll show you around the company. It was rare for her to come, so he wanted to show her his kingdom. Wei Bai was a little embarrassed. She took the initiative to push his wheelchair. Jiang Jiushi frowned. Let someone else do it. You can see it when you open the bookshelf next time, if you like. You're tuning in to the Romance Rendezvous YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.